The dawn over Blackwater Bay leaked into the sky like pale wine, thin and strained after the riotous storms of the night before. A briny mist clung to the quays and the crooked teeth of the city's walls, blurring masts, rooftops, and all the thousand watchful eyes that called that place home. Arya Stark tasted the salt on her tongue as she stepped from a flat-bottomed skiff onto the slimy lower pier, her feet bare, her hair shorn to a ragged cap that could have belonged to any half-starved gutter snipe in King's Landing. She wore a scratchy dress the color of dead ash and carried a wicker basket lined with wilting camellia leaves. To the guards she passed, boys not yet grown into their steel, yawning while they examined crates of eels and sweet sisters. She was only another orphan employed by the Tyrell kitchens to fetch morning herbs. She slipped among stevedores and fishwives with silent ease, counting the paces from the pier to the break in the second-hand wall, where brick gave way to timber patched hastily after the wildfire of Stannis' assault. The gap had seemed unremarkable when she marked it days earlier, but in sunlight it felt like the opening in a giant's skull, too wide not to be noticed. She caught herself slowing, drawing a breath. "A girl is no one," she whispered inwardly, the cadence of the words like polished prayer stones. "No one can be afraid." With her free hand, she fingered the bone needle sewn inside her sleeve. The makeshift stiletto Jaqen had pressed into her palm and called payment rendered. It weighed almost nothing, bone on bone, but its promise made her blood thrum. Inside the city, Flea Bottom already buzzed. The purple wedding would unfurl before sunset, and every crooked alley hummed with gossip. How the High Septon had promised a sermon sung rather than spoken. How Lord Tywin had commissioned fountains to run with arbor red. How a rumored manticore, a gift from Karth, had been smuggled into the menagerie and might be unveiled to honor the king. Arya drifted through it all, listening the way cats listen, collecting names and whispers. The hounds had been one of those names. Some said he had fled. Some said they'd found his head nailed to the sept of Baelor. Some swore he now served Lady Sansa, the dove of the north, who was once again to be displayed like a living ornament upon Joffrey's arm. It struck Arya how stories sprouted like weeds in the city's cracks, watered by fear and fertilized by hunger. She remembered the last time she'd walked these streets, the dead stringing from balconies, the smell of piss and horse blood mixing with smoke. Then she had fled with Yoren, soaked in another boy's crimson, and the city had shrunk behind her like a flame seen through a keyhole. Now she stalked it willingly, the key in her hand. At mid-morning she reached the sigil gate and showed the smooth-faced guard her writ, a scrap bearing Sir Meryn's broken seal and a list of Nodgrass, valerian, and maiden's tears for Lady Sansa's prenuptial digestion. The seal was false, the list was real, and the guard's eyes moved over neither. He waved her through, already flirting with a perfumed scribe from the treasury who waited behind. Arya slipped beneath the portcullis before guilt could make him think twice. Beyond lay the outer bailey, a maze of wagons, tents, and wooden scaffolds rising around the sepulchral bulk of the Red Keep. Gardeners were still pruning lilac boughs into the hedges. Seamstresses darted about like mice, clutching lengths of Tyrell green and Lannister crimson. Cooks shouted for more lard, more pepper, more wine. The castle breathed, its lungs full of sweet heat and terror. Arya moved as though she were the exhale. No one stopped her. A child slave hurried by with a tray of sugared violets. Two Myrish singers rehearsed a ballad in a dialect meant to sound exotic but not incomprehensible. A gaggle of Golgs compared the softness of their new winter cloaks and boasted of what they'd do to Margaery Tyrell if she should smile twice in their direction. Everywhere around her the court prepared to adore its young king. Arya's route wound downward, through the servants' stairs, past the laundry, where handmaids wrung silks until their fingers bled, and into the bowels of the keep, where the smokehouses gaped like scorched mouths. Here she found the doors she'd memorized, 2 heavy oaken slabs bound in black iron, always ajar for the constant traffic of potboys and kitchen girls. From this threshold she scented goose fat, cinnamon, a noisome tang of butchered boar. A tired porter with a lantern nodded vaguely at her herb basket and returned to stacking cabbages. She entered. Yakin's map of the kitchens had been exact. The corridors cramped, the ceilings low, yet each passageway branching into 3 more, a warren designed so hungry armies might be fed, without the king ever glimpsing the faces of those who roasted his dinners. One turn led to the scullery, another to the salt stores, another to the pump wheel that drew river water up for cooling wine. ARYA took the last, descending a short flight before she arrived at a locked grate of rusted bars. The key to that grate dangled from a hook tucked behind a shelf of pickled turnips, exactly where the Lorithai spy and the Tyrell retinue had sworn it would. She unlocked the grate, pulled it shut behind her, and padded on into pitch darkness. A girl of 9 might have quailed at the dark. ARYA had butchered pigeons in the alleys of Harrenhal. She had stalked Lannister outriders through pine shadows so thick a hand vanished before the eyes. Darkness was a cloak she knew how to wear. She followed the moist smell of old stone, counting steps. 10, 17, 23, until her palm found the jamb of a narrow door. She eased it open. A small chamber lay beyond, windowless, lit by candle stubs no bigger than fingers. Inside, 3 men waited. Their faces were muffled by plain linen. They wore rough garments, unadorned by sigil or sash. Only their eyes moved when she entered. "Earl is late," said the tallest, his voice a dry rustle. "The girl is thorough," ARYA answered. The shortest chuckled. "So she believes." The tall one, he smelled of cumin and saffron, the scent of the narrow sea in summer, nodded once. He reached behind him, lifted a cloth-wrapped parcel, and placed it on the low trestle table. "Your gift, sweetling," he said. "A sting no lion can survive." Arya's throat tightened, though her fingers remained steady. She unfolded the parcel. Inside lay 2 items. A phial of thick, milky liquid, stoppered with wax, and a fine wire garrote as thin as a hair and oiled until it gleamed in the candlelight. The phial bore no sigil, but she knew its story. Widow's blood, the alchemists called it, odorless, slow as winter night. It curdled the bowels while numbing every nerve. Joffrey might drink and laugh, might jeer at Tyrion's posture, or pinch Sansa's waist, and never feel a thing until his lungs forgot the art of breathing. When at last his eyes rolled white and his tongue swelled, he would still taste the sweetmeats he'd devoured. But the garrote, ARYA touched it lightly, was a promise to herself. If chance fails, steel prevails, the faceless men said. Joffrey was seldom alone, but singers must breathe, and jesters must fetch new masks, and even a king must lean forward to sip. For that single heartbeat, the wire could speak. "A girl accepts," she murmured. The 3 men bowed their heads, and when they lifted them, she saw what lay behind their linen veils. Not faces, but silence. A silence that spread through her like oil in water. They expected no thanks, no vow. She took both tools, tucked the phial in her basket beneath the maiden's tears, coiled the wire inside the hem of her sleeve. When she emerged from the secret room, she was once more the ash-colored drudge girl. The kitchens roared around her, scullions shouted, bells clanged, marking the hour of the noonday tarts. No one mocked her. Ser Dontos Halart reeled through the rose garden, stinking of cheap wine and cheaper despair. His mismatched hose were soaked past the knee, from some fountain he had fallen into or perhaps climbed out of. He recited bawdy rhymes to a cloud of bees until they scattered, then leaned on the marble thigh of a dryad statue and attempted to piss on the hedges shaped like crowns. Arya watched from a lattice arch half a dozen yards away, unseen among the trailing wisteria. Under the wallflower's cloak, her heart beat steady. The Fool Knight was to serve as her second key. Sansa trusted him. Sansa would follow him. And Arya needed Sansa at the feast, visible and vulnerable, so that Joffrey's suffering might bruise the Boy King, not only in body, but in vanity. She nearly pitied Dantos, nearly. His face, once florid, had grown sunken and papery, like parchment scraped thin and used again. Yet he smiled while he sang, as though the world contained no cruelty he had not already tasted. She wondered whether mercy lived somewhere inside him, or whether he had simply forgotten its shape. Either way, he would play his little part. Arya turned away before he noticed her and crept on toward the maiden vault. The corridors above were airy, walls hung with Tyrell banners twined with roses and thorns. The scent of applewood smoke drifted from braziers shaped like griffins. Guards in crimson cloaks lounged at every third doorway, talking of the obscene fortune wagered that morning on how many courses the king would demand be served. The smallest bet, Arya noted, concerned whether the imp would vomit before the third course or after the sixth. Not one wagered Joffrey might choke before he ever tasted the boar. She blended among servants, bearing bolt after bolt of linen. Every few steps she whispered the names on a list: Meryn Trent, Ilyn Payne, Cersei Lannister, and tasted the thrill of revenge across her tongue. But she did not linger on that ecstasy. Lesson 2 from Jaqen: a prayer is a blade, sharpen it once and sheathe it again. She focused instead on the door up ahead, guarded by 2 Tyrell armsmen in forest green cloaks. Behind that door waited Sansa. The armsmen eyed her skeptically. The taller held out a hand. Orders. Arya pretended to fumble for a parchment. Then, remember, she had none. Lady Sansa's Doctus told me, she stammered, letting her repaired Riverlands accent slip through. Her stomach was in knots. Knotgrass and valerian, quick as can be, they said. She lifted the maiden's tears. This above all. The shorter armsman glanced at the other. Let her through. If the girl soils herself before the wedding, Queen Cersei will hang every one of us. The taller shrugged. The latch clicked. The door opened. Sansa sat at a vanity before a 3-paneled mirror. A white mantle draped over her shoulders. Her hair shone like the copper of autumn leaves, intricately woven with emerald beads in a pattern Arya had never seen in Winterfell. It made her heart ache to note how regal her sister looked, how fragile too. The room smelled of rosewater, yet an acid sting of fear lay beneath. A septa hovered nearby, dabbing Sansa's wrists with orris powder, cooing about calm breaths and proper posture. Arya crossed the plush carpeting on silent feet. When next the septa turned away to mend a loose seam, Arya stepped behind Sansa and set the basket gently atop the vanity. Their eyes met in the mirror. Recognition flared and sputtered like a struck match. Sansa stilled, her breath trapped in her throat. Her lips parted, though she spoke no name. Arya placed one finger to her own lips, a small, urgent motion. Sansa's eyes shimmered. Sweetling, the septa chirped, returning. Smell these blossoms. Soothing, yes? Arya seized that moment to slip the phial from beneath the camellia leaves and lodge it beneath the pile of sachets already arrayed on the vanity. Sansa's gaze flicked to it, then back to Arya, confusion and disbelief warring in her eyes. Arya gave the smallest nod. The septa fussed. Poor dear, shall I fetch a draught of verjuice? It'll settle the nerves. Liar, Sansa whispered, her voice steadying. First, the knotgrass. Please. Lord Jamde. Arya laid the herbs out, crushed them with a mortar, added a spoon of honey and a splash of warm water from the kettle. She stirred until the potion thickened to a pale paste. Sansa accepted the cup with trembling hands. Arya leaned close under the pretense of adjusting the mantle. In the merest feather of a whisper, she breathed, "When the king drinks, do not." Sansa's lashes fluttered. "Arya," she mouthed. But Arya had already scooped the basket to her hip and backed away. She was a servant again, a shadow sooner forgotten than remembered. As the door closed behind her, she heard Sansa's voice break. "My lady of sorrow, keep me steady." The Septa assumed she prayed to the mother. Arya knew better. By mid-afternoon, the feast hall glittered like a hoard beneath a dragon's claw. Lamps fashioned from golden peacocks cast jeweled light across the lacquered floor. Tables arranged in concentric rings blossomed with sugared fruits sculpted into lions, with cinnamon swans afloat upon lakes of cream. The Sept of Baelor itself, visible through tall windows, seemed to bow in homage to the finery within. Arya waited outside the servants' corridor that fed into the westmost ring. From here, she could glimpse the dais where the royal party would soon sit. Her pulse slowed, deliberate as snowfall. It was not yet the hour of the first course. There remained tasks. Wine available to princes and queens was stored not in the kitchens, but in the cellars beneath the Hall of Heroes, where old Kingsguard remains were interred behind polished marble. Changing casks meant crossing sacred ground. 2 barrel wagons already stood by the south cellar entrance. The vintners unloading them wore the sigil of the arbor, a cluster of grapes wreathed in gold. Arya drifted near the rear wheel of the second wagon and loosened the leather thong about her wrist. Attached to that thong was a token, fragile as spun glass, a Myrish lens small enough to balance on her fingernail. When the vintner leaned to lift another cask, Arya slipped the lens into the pocket of his wide sash. She moved on, her steps unhurried. No one noticed. Minutes later, beyond the torchlit mouth of the cellar, she found the corridor where 4 enormous tons of Dornish red lay side by side like slumbering giants. Here the air tasted of clay and fermenting grape. Floor and wall were slick with condensation. Only 2 guards patrolled the corridor, each bored and picking grime from under his nails with the point of a dagger. Neither looked twice at the skinny girl in ash-gray rags. She knelt beside the leftmost tun, examining the brass spigot. Beside it waited a row of crystal flagons, the only vessels fit for a king. She selected one flagon, turned it to admire the etching of a 3-headed dragon along its stem, and produced from beneath her apron a sliver of soft wax, pink as a sunset cloud. With deft fingers, she pressed the wax into the hollow of the stopper, meant for the flagon's narrow neck, sealing it tight. Then she unscrewed the phial of widow's blood and poured 3 shimmering drops onto the wax. The poison soaked in silently. She replaced the stopper, wiped the flagon clean with a rag, and set it among its fellows. It looked no different, smelled of nothing but glass. She left the cellar as a pair of Tyrell pages bustled in to ready the wine. One complained of the weight of crystal. The other laughed about betting his year's stipend that the king could out-to-drink Lord Mace. Arya slipped past them like smoke. Only when she descended 3 flights and reached the green marbled corridor behind the musicians' gallery did she allow her hands to tremble. A girl is no one. A girl is the wind, she reminded herself. But she was also Arya of House Stark, Jon's sister, Ned's daughter. The thought steadied her. She unhooked the garrote from her sleeve, verifying its shine in a sliver of polished shield hanging as decoration. The hourglass-shaped handles fitted her palms as if she'd been born gripping them. Joffrey's neck would be soft as suet. His blood might spurt, it might not. The wire would work either way. But steel was crude beside widow's blood. If the gods were kind, and they rarely were, the poison would finish the king before Arya had to. Below, trumpets blared the arrival of House Tyrell. The feast's beginning drew near. From the musician's loft, she watched the hall fill like a gilded amphitheater. Lords strutted in silks bright enough to blind. Ladies hid behind fans embroidered with twisting vines. Even the small folk permitted onto the second tier wore new linen in honor of their king. Torchlight required no permission to touch them. It painted rosy halos upon every cheek, bathing the hall in warmth. The warmth did not reach Arya's bones. She saw swords at every hip and the shadows behind every laughter. She recognized the mountain's savage squire, Bolivar's sneer, even the sly, dimpled girl who had served at Harrenhal and once spat in hot pie's stew. Each glance reminded her how many enemies still breathed. Queen Cersei glided in, draped in lion-red velvet, her golden hair piled high, a diadem of rubies crowning her brow. Prince Tommen trotted beside her, small and solemn. Then came Joffrey Baratheon, king of the Seven Kingdoms, clad in cloth of gold, so thick it rustled like armor. A crown of antlers and rose-gold lions weighed upon his brow. He paused atop the dais steps to bask in the shouts of long life. The king? Arya clenched the rail. Joffrey's face, some called it handsome, looked to Arya like a wax doll half-melted near the hearth. His lips were too red, his eyes too pale. When he smiled, the smile never reached those eyes. Cold as chips of summer ice, they slid over his courtiers as though each were a pawn already sacrificed. Sansa stepped after him, escorted by Ser Loras, and Arya thought she glimpsed tears winking like glass upon her sister's lashes. Hold, just hold. The courses began. Quails stuffed with dates, baked swan whose wings had been resewn to its body, trout shaped like dragons, peacocks whose tails fanned in the candlelit breeze. Musicians played, jugglers juggled, and once a troop of dwarfs staged a clumsy melee to raucous applause. Joffrey laughed loudest of all. The third course brought the wine, arbor white first, served by maids in Myrish lace. The poison slept in the Dornish red that would follow. Arya watched every flagon descend the stairs of the musician's loft toward the floor. She traced the dragonustem of the one she'd doctored. It passed from page to page, disappeared behind a pillar of marble where shadows jostled, emerged again in a different hand. Sweat pooled in her palms. A new jester bounded up the dais steps, jangling bells. Moonboy wore motley in sapphire and silver and told jest after jest about Lord Tywin's fathering bastards with goats. Joffrey shrieked laughter until his cheeks glowed. Just drink, Arya willed, but the king's goblet never emptied. He drank small sips. He tossed half the wine at Ser Dantos for another joke. When he tired of white, he called for the true red, and 5 crystal flagons streamed toward the dais. Arya's breath froze. The torch guttered below, its flame bowing. Wind from the western windows swept through, lifting burners and banners alike. In that moment, the serving girl stumbling beneath the flagons wobbled. Her sleeve snagged on a lord's chair. Flagons clinked precariously. Knights cursed. Ser Meryn reached to steady the girl, and Joffrey raised his hand. Let her alone, you oaf, a lion thirst. The hall tittered dutifully. The girl curtsied awkward thanks and set 5 goblets on Joffrey's table, her eyes downcast. Arya could not see which flagon she poured from. Torchlight flashed off glass, bright and blinding. She saw only the glint, the arc of red wine, the ruby tide filling the royal cup. Then the cup rose to Joffrey's lips. He drank. A hush fell like a blanket tossed over a stage, but the hush lasted only a heartbeat. Joffrey slammed the goblet down. Wine sloshed. Stronger, he proclaimed, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. But sour. Is it Dornish swill? Bring me another, and bring the vintner. Some fool has sent me vinegar. Nilni. Laughs returned, forced. The vintner scurried forth to protest. Joffrey cuffed him, sending him sprawling. Cersei's laugh rang like cut crystal. Tyrion Lannister, seated low beside Sansa, watched his nephew with eyes narrowed to slits. Sansa's fingers gripped the arm of her chair so hard her knuckles shone white. Arya felt her pulse in her throat. Slow, she reminded herself. Slow like widow's hand. The poison would cradle Joffrey gently. Its first caress would be thirst. Next, the numbness. Last, the tightening. He would endure perhaps half an hour. Few poisons of the East worked so languidly, but this one did. It would let the victim remain alert, even mocking while failure crept through every vein. Across the hall, the sun dipped toward the horizon. Light ambered, limning dust motes in molten gold. Servants lit additional torches. Minstrels tuned high strings for the dance. Arya's garrote lay against her wrist, feather-light. Each heartbeat thundered. Joffrey rose, swaying only slightly. He grasped Sansa's hand. Come, my lady, a king must dance. The crowd roared approval. Sansa's eyes, cast half down, flicked once, across the hall, up toward the musician's loft, as though seeking a ghost. They met Arya's, and for the first time since their father died, Arya saw her sister's mouth curve into a secret, desperate smile. Hope tasted like river water in her throat. Joffrey tugged Sansa toward the center floor. A piper struck a lively jig. Couples surged to join. Joffrey spun Sansa once, twice. He laughed, hair aflame in torchlight. He laughed again, and then, was there a falter? Did his foot slip? Arya leaned forward so hard the railing creaked beneath her weight. The king's laugh pitched upward. He released Sansa's hand and pressed his knuckles to his ribcage, as though to smother a flame inside. His gaze darted left, right. Sweat glimmered upon his temples, despite the cool of evening. He staggered, caught himself against a stout Frey whose name Arya did not know. The musicians faltered mid-bar. Silence descended. Joffrey straightened, forcing a grin. Wine, he croaked. More wine. Samarin hurried with a goblet. Joffrey drank too fast, wine dribbling from his chin. He coughed once, a wet, hollow sound, and spat crimson across the floor. Gasps rippled. Cersei stood, her chair toppling behind her. Joff. Sansa retreated 2 steps, pale as moonlit milk. Tyrion shot to his feet, eyes hawk-like. Ser Boros Barristan. No, Barristan had fled. Boros Blount hurried forward, his sword half-drawn as if blades could scare off sickness. Joffrey gagged. His hand clawed at his throat as though invisible stranglers choked him. He tried to speak and brought up a slick rope of violet mucus. The hall erupted into screams. Women fainted, plates crashed, knights surged. Arya's heart pounded. A war drum. It was too soon. Widow's blood should lull. It should be gentle, spare its victim the knowledge of approach. Yet Joffrey convulsed, eyes bulging. His knees struck marble. Fingers tore at his own tongue. Blood blossomed from his nostrils. His body shook as though caught in a smith's tongue. Faces blurred around him, forming a wall of horror. Cersei shrieked for Pycelle. Pycelle tottered forward, robes flapping like torn sails. Too late. Joffrey choked once more, a final, monstrous sound. Then, quite suddenly, he went still. Silence devoured the hall. Torches hissed. Somewhere, a goblet rolled, clinking until it reached a table leg and spun to rest. Arya's garrote sagged in her fingers, forgotten. She expected a roar of accusations. Instead, a hush thickened, broken only by Cersei's ragged breathing. The queen knelt, cradling her son's corpse. His face had gone the color of crushed violets. Foam rhymed his lips. High above, in the loft, Arya realized she was shaking. You wanted this, she told herself. You swore it. Yet, the sight of death did not bring joy. only an emptiness as vast as the frost fangs. Joffrey was gone. Sansa was free. Their father was still dead. Then, movement flickered below. Sansa, pale, trembling, backed away from the dais. Her eyes found Arya's once more. Something like gratitude shone there, and stark terror alongside. Arya nodded, infinitesimal. Go, read to us. Paidi, Jindostuat. It happened quickly. A woman screamed, pointing at Tyrion, whose hand still clutched the goblet he had lifted moments earlier to snip. The queen's gaze followed the pointing finger, transformed into molten hate. "Up," she howled. "Tyrion, what have you done?" Guards closed in. Arya felt the air shift. Her moment of stillness ended. She turned, moving for the servant's stair at the rear of the loft. But a shape detached from the shadows behind her, moving swifter than any guard. A hand seized her wrist, iron-hot. She spun, bone needle flashing to strike, and froze when she beheld the face of the hound. His burned flesh writhed as he grinned. "Little wolf," Sandor Clegane growled softly. "Thought I'd smelled fresh blood." Arya's heart slammed once, twice. Somewhere below, chaos erupted, steel drawn, accusations shouted. Lannister banners clashing with Tyrell indignation. But in that instant, above it all, the hound's grip tightened. "Come," he said. "We've hunting yet to do." Storm clouds gathered over King's Landing, bruising the sunset, swallowing the last gold from the sky, while within the Red Keep the halls ran wild with rumor and steel. Cersei shrieked for every door to be sealed, for traitors to be flayed, for the heads of those who had failed her boy. Bells tolled, not in mourning, but in warning. Treason's blade had found a king. Arya fled through passages she scarcely recalled, guided by the hound's unerring instinct for violence. They moved like twin shadows, evading clusters of gold cloaks herded by panicked stewards. Twice they ducked behind Aros walls as Ser Jon snarled orders. "Seize the queen's uncle, hold the hand, fetch the Grand Maester." Once the hound cuffed a young squire who blundered into their path, leaving the boy gasping for breath, but alive. "Waste no time," he muttered. The wolf and the hound hunt, larger meat. Arya's mind raced. The poison should have worked slow, painless. Somebody had tampered. The vintner, the servant girl, or one of the three masked men whose gift she'd taken. The faceless men were precise artisans. Still, Widow's blood was delicate. A wrong drop, a shaken cask, a trace of powdered seeds left on the rim. It could curdle into horror. "No matter," she vowed. "I will know the truth." They emerged into a narrow courtyard behind the White Sword Tower. Snow had begun to fall, fine, stinging needles that vanished on stone yet sparkled on torchlight. The hound paused, sniffing the air like a warhound. "Gate'll be shut," he said. But sewn pockets gape worse than sewn mouths tonight. Folk will try to flee. Chulo. Arya adjusted the bone needle in her grip and asked, "Why help me?" Sandor Clegane huffed amusement and spat. "Haughty kings hate gold cloaks more, but mostly hate that bitch o' a mother. Saw your pretty sister caged these passes o' months. Decided, why the seven hells not?" He shrugged. An avalanche of shrugged stone. "And you owe me still." She frowned. "For what? For not slicing your throat outside the twins? Debt's a debt." Arya opened her mouth with a retort, but a commotion cut her off. Over the walls spilled torches, shouts, the clatter of hooves. The main gates boomed shut. War drums beat. She recognized Sir Meryn's harsh bark, ordering archers to the ramparts. The city, roused from revel to riot, convulsed. The hound jerked his head. "We've moments, this way." He led her toward a postern half hidden by fallen masonry from Maegor's reign. A lone sentry stood guard, shivering. Before Arya could warn him, Sandor strode forward, snatched the man's spear, and knocked him senseless with the haft. The hound rifled the sentry's belt for keys and tossed them to ARYA. Open. Metal squealed. Beyond the postern lay a cramped stair curling downward into the mountain's belly. The iron tang of subterranean water wafted up. ARYA swallowed. Where does it lead? Boat tunnels for the Targaryen kings, smugglers, assassins, whoever paid the dragon gatekeeper. A man could walk half a league under this city and never see daylight. That's how we escape. That's how we hunt, the hound corrected. Poison's a woman's weapon. Still, someone slipped the cup. And the dwarf. He paused, listening to distant shouts. The dwarf's for the noose, unless we pry him loose. I'll not see a dog hung for a lion's rot. Nor Arryn. ARYA did not trust Tyrion Lannister, yet she remembered he had been kind to Sansa, and he was a wronged son, as she was a wronged daughter. But freeing him meant venturing back into jaws already snapping shut. She flexed the garrote lodged in her sleeve. First we find Sansa, she said. Sandor grunted assent. Nido Obishi, Nido Samaye. Together they plunged into the darkness. Under the Red Keep, the tunnels wandered like veins. The air grew heavy, damp, and smelled of crushed stone. Sometimes the path widened into vaults, ringed by arches heavy with age. In one, they found rotted barrels stamped with the sigil of King Aerys. In another, smashed reliquaries rumored to hold the dust of long-dead dragons. Across each threshold, ARYA felt history shiver, a million ghosts brushing past. They marched in silence, save the hound's muted curses. Torchlight cast monstrous shapes on the walls, melding his scarred features into nightmarish masks. ARYA was not afraid. She had fear enough for ice demons and dead things, for whales of iron on the Blackwater, but not for Sandor. He was a beast who snarled, she, a wolf who bit. At last, the tunnel split. One corridor slanted upward, faint lantern glow painting its stones. Another slithered deeper, toward a roar that could only be the river. Sandor paused. Up leads to the dungeons, he observed. The dwarfs down below the level cells. Odds he's caged already. Then we go up. Arya's jaw set. Sansa first. The hound considered, then nodded. He shifted his grip on the sentry spear. Useless in tight corridors, but a comfort. They ascended. Each flight of steps seemed carved from a different century. Rough-hewn, igneous, polished obsidian, bricks of crumbling fire clay. Through arrow slits, ARYA glimpsed the outline of the city, a patchwork of rooftops beneath spreading fires. Panic spread like spilled oil. Bells tolled from the great septi. Smoke pillars rose. She wondered whether Joffrey's death might birth 1,000 more. An avalanche set loose by her hand. Guards thronged the upper passages, Lannister men bristling, Tyrell cousins arguing, gold cloaks unsure whose command they served. Every corridor behind them seemed to fill with shouting moments after they passed, as though screams pursued their heels. Twice ARYA and the hound hid in shadows. Once they spied Pycelle carried on a litter, babbling about basilisk venom and milk of the poppy and serpents of Sothrios. The old man's beard fluttered like dirty snow. Sandor spat again. Master's rattling chicken bones. They crept through a library that smelled of mold and vellum, a chamber filled with dusty suits of Reachman armor, offered helmets they donned for disguise. One tall helm gilded and unpleasantly warm, one slim with a visor shaped like a falcon's beak. Thus masked, they navigated swifter, answering no questions but pointing ahead when challenged. Soon they reached the Queen's ballroom, a rotunda directly below the royal apartments. Sconces burned high on each column. The marble floor gleamed black. And there, ringed by 4 unsheathed blades, stood Sansa Stark. Arya's heart lifted. Sansa's gown was torn, her braid half unraveled. but she held her spine straight, hands folded like a lady in a set. Beside her loomed an armored knight with the antlered helm of the King's Guard. Sir Garland Tyrell. No. The Tyrell knight's face was calm, gentle. This man's posture radiated unease. His sword rested on Sansa's shoulder, a warning. Two queens faced off across the ballroom, Cersei Lannister, eyes red, hair disheveled, and Margaery Tyrell, green silk blood splashed from some poor soul trampled in the feast. Between them, Pycelle knelt, still wheezing. "You'll hand her over," Cersei hissed. "My father's ward, my son's plaything. She is Lannister property, and with her I'll see the truth cut from the dwarf." Margaery raised one brow. "Property? Last I reckoned, the Lady Sansa is the North's only living Stark, and my dear sister by marriage. Touch her, your grace, and the Reach will know why roses need thorns." Nah. Steel scraped as the four gods tightened formation. Sansa's eyes darted, searching for rescue that would not come. Arya felt the old rage stir, hot as forge of fire. Her hands moved. Sandor's grip barred her. 70 against 2, he muttered. "Closer to 50, she corrected. "Still fool's odds. Then let's make them ours." Footsteps rang behind. A column of gold cloaks marched into the ballroom, led by a familiar limp. Sir Loras Tyrell, white cloak streaked with crimson. Guards clashed, raised voices. Lines blurred. Cersei screamed for traitors' heads. Margaery took her sister's arm, the Knight of Flowers pressing close. In the confusion, Sansa wrenched free and ran, straight toward the twin visors of the Hound and the Wolf. Recognition flashed as Arya lifted her helm's visor. Sansa gasped. "Come," she whispered, grabbing Sansa's hand. Sandor shoved aside a gold cloak with his spear butt. They plunged back into the corridor. Chaos erupted behind them. The Tyrells seized control of the ballroom doors. Cersei hollered like a mad crow. But Arya, Sansa, and Sandor slipped away. Down flights of steps they fled. Racing through rooms Arya barely saw. Her sister clutched her, sobbing thanks, questions, apologies. Arya answered none. Time enough later. If there is later. They re-entered the tunnels through a ladder hewn into the mountain. The door slammed, echoing like a gong. Darkness swallowed them. And there, for the first time, Arya let herself breathe. They paused in a chamber where stalactites dripped centuries' gold tears. Sansa collapsed onto a moss-slick rock, trembling. The Hound remained by the doorway, listening for pursuit. Arya knelt, examined her sister for cuts. None serious. The tremors came from shock. "Is Joffrey? Is he truly dead?" Sansa's voice cracked. Arya nodded. Sansa exhaled. Relief and dread warred on her face. "I prayed," she whispered. "Mother, forgive me, but I prayed for it. Yet when it happened, the sound he made..." Arya. His eyes. "Forget them," Arya said gently. "Remember, father. Remember Winterfell. Now, Liwa, Teshuasian, Chesigone." Sansa's gaze found hers, a bridge spanning a chasm of grief. They sat thus until the Hound cleared his throat. "Touching as a harp, but wolves may weep later. The keep swarms." He eyed the corridor. "Where we headed?" Arya hesitated. She had no map beyond the memory of whispers. "Out," she said. "North, to the Blackwater, then a ship." Sansa shook her head. "None will sail. The port's under guard. The river's chained since Stannis." Sandor grunted. Bogs south of the city. Blackwater rush splits. Smugglers keep skiffs." He eyed Arya. "Your call, little wolf. But we'll need coin, food, and fresh horses once ashore." "Nice. Arya rose. She pressed the garrote's handles together, ensuring no kink would betray it when needed. "We find them," she said. Sansa stared. "You sound older." "I am." They ready to move when a faint scuff echoed from the stair above. All three froze. Again. Claws on stone? No, boot leather. Slow, deliberate. Arya slipped into shadow, garrote uncoiling like a whisper. Sandor hefted spear and dagger both. A lantern's glow wavered against the corridor wall, its bearer still unseen. Arya breathed through her teeth, waiting. The figure appeared, a dwarf in torn crimson, chains dangling from raw wrists. Tyrion Lannister's eyes glittered with cunning and pain. Behind him, half hidden by his shadow, walked Shay, hair shorn, cheeks tear-streaked, clutching a heavy purse. No gods accompanied them. Tyrion paused at sight of the silent trio. "Well," he said, voice hoarse, "if this isn't the strangest supper party the gods ever convene." Sandor growled. Arya narrowed eyes. Sansa gasped, then rose, uncertain. Tyrion dipped his head. "I would kneel, but my knees are indisposed." He rattled the chains. "My jailer fell victim to misfortunate dagger work. His fault, really." He inspected the hound. "Sandor, fancy meeting you off your leash." "That leash snapped when Boykin kicked," the hound replied. Arya stepped forward. "What do you want?" "An exit." Tyrion's gaze flicked to Sansa. "And her safety, which by the looks of things you're ably pursuing. Perhaps we can share pathways." Shay's lips trembled. "We haven't much time, my lion. They'll hunt you." "They'll hunt all of us," Tyrion said. "Better together than served separately." Arya regarded him, thinking of the list. Tyrion's name was not on it. He had never hurt her. He had protected Sansa when he could, and he, too, was blamed for Joffrey's death. Perhaps the gods had chosen allies for her this night. She lowered the garrote. "Damn," she said. The hound snorted but did not argue. Together, the five plunged deeper into the tunnels, lantern light bobbing like a lone star swallowed by night. Behind them, in the depths above, bells tolled on. King's Landing, queenless, kingless, bleeding from within, began its long descent into chaos worse than any war. And beneath its foundations, two daughters of Winterfell walked side by side for the first time since their father tasted steel. Ahead lay the river and darkness, and a future unwritten. Arya felt the bone needle tap her wrist with each stride, a silent metronome counting out a vengeance not yet finished. Joffrey was dead, but the song of ice and fire had only changed its key. Shadisha was to be. The lantern's glow was the only warmth in the tunnel, a fragile orb of gold that trembled across sweating stone and rough, forgotten brick. Every so often the flame guttered, casting their faces into monstrous masks. Tyrion's scarred brow, Sansa's wide, reddened eyes, Shay's bitten lips, the hound's ruined cheek, Arya's fierce, hungry stare. Water dripped in lonely rhythm from the ceiling, echoing as though each droplet foretold a danger still unseen. Far above them, bells kept tolling, a clash of bronze and grief that seeped through the mountain like the groan of something wounded and angry. But here beneath it all the paths were narrow, twisting, and carved for smuggling secrets, not sunlight. Sandor led, half-hunched so the crest of his helm would not scrape the jagged rock overhead. He carried the spear across his shoulders as though it weighed no more than straw. Yet every stride broadcast menace, even in half-light, even reeling from wine and fury. He walked like a man prepared to tyrannize death itself if it dared step into his road. Tyrion padded after him, chains chiming softly against each other. Shay stayed 2 paces behind the dwarf, clutching the purse to her chest. Sansa and Arya kept to the rear. Fingers laced tight, the hush between them filled with words they had neither breath nor courage to speak. Only their squeezed palms confessed what could not yet be said. "We are alive. You are here. I will not leave you again." The corridor slanted downward until the dank air stole their breaths. A chill rose from below, carrying hints of green rot and something acrid that tasted of old flame. When the torch caught a wall niche, it revealed melted stone, fused and pocked like candle wax, remnant scars of dragon fire. Tyrion stopped to run a hand across the bubbled surface, curiosity glittering despite fatigue. Aegon's paranoia carved more escape roads through this hill than Maegor's cruelty ever managed. But dragons left the deeper marks. Never trust the whim of a Targaryen alchemist. "Move your stunted legs," Sandor growled. "Lecture later." Tyrion inclined his head in mock courtesy, the iron cuff on his wrist clinking. "Sir Hound, your eloquence improves by the moment." "No, sir." "Indeed. A free cur now." "Nanon, desidio, pisano, escida, did." Sandor's shoulders bunched, but Arya touched his elbow before he could retort. "Save it for someone worth the spit," she said. The hound snorted and trudged on. They came to a junction where 4 tunnels met like the spokes of a wheel. Here the rock ceiling was higher, arched into crooked ribs, and the passages converged around a black stone pedestal. Carved upon its face were words so eroded that only fragments remained. "And may all who seek escape remember the price of blazes, unchained." Beneath the half-legible warning, a deep bowl of quartz collected the constant drip of water from a fissure overhead, brimming until trickles spilled down the pedestal and pooled across the floor. The path forward vanished in that ankle-deep puddle, its surface opaque with scum. Sansa tugged her skirts close and shivered. "How far until daylight?" "Farther," Arya answered. "Closer." The contradiction fit her feelings. Each step left Winterfell farther behind and brought her nearer to something unseen. Revenge, perhaps, or simply a horizon she could claim as her own. Tyrion crouched and cupped water to his lips. He swallowed, then offered the puddle a sardonic bow. "To the health of kings," he said. "May they all choke as sweetly." A boom shuddered through the bedrock overhead. Dust sifted from a crack. Shay whimpered, clutching Tyrion's shoulder. Lights flickered in the dwarf's eyes. Not fear exactly, but calculation. "They seal halls," he judged. "Collapse corridors. Cersei will bury half the castle if she thinks my body lies somewhere beneath. She must have a corpse for her grief." "And you?" Sandor asked, stepping into the puddle without hesitation, boots sloshing. "What is it you must have?" "An ocean," Tyrion replied. "Or at least a river wide enough that lions cannot smell past its salt." "The rush tide meets the black water just beyond the mud gate," Arya said. "There are fishing shacks on the south bank that rent skiffs to poachers. I watched them once, when father spoke with the city's justiciars. They bribed the gate sergeants for the night catch." Tyrion raised his brows. "A memory with timing most felicitous, my lady wolf." "It's no memory," she said. "It's a target." They followed the tunnel that dipped deepest, guided by the pooling water's subtle current. Soon the footing turned slick with a substance like algal grease. Shay slipped. Sansa steadied her. Shay gave Sansa a wan but grateful smile, the first that did not tremble. Farther on the air warmed, and a dull orange pulse lit the darkness. Not flame, but something viscous and alive. A faint luminescence crawling along cracks in the stone. When Sandor brushed a spear tip against it, the goo recoiled like a slug and left his weapon glowing sickly white. "Wildfire residue," Tyrion judged. "Or its bastard cousin. Let's take care not to breathe too deeply." "They use this way to drag clay pots," Arya asked. "Aye," Sandor muttered. "Dragon shit to burn ships when Stannis sailed on them." Sansa covered her nose, retching. The memory of charred men screaming across black water remained vivid for the hound. Arya saw it in the way his jaw tightened, teeth grinding. Her own recollections drifted to the night she watched the river burn from a cart of prisoners bound for Harrenhal. Green fire dancing on water like a demon's festival. Someone had laughed that night, a prisoner hysterical beyond reason, and the Lannister guard silenced him with a mace blow. The sound of bone cracking echoed now in her ears. The tunnel bent once, then twice, then leveled out. Ahead, the dim buttery glow brightened to gold. A breeze whispered, cool and fresh, the scent of sedge reeds, of damp river mud, of freedom. Arya lengthened her stride, pulling Sansa forward. Sandor did not object. Even he breathed, lighter. The low arch at the corridor's end spilled them into a cavern, spacious enough to stable 100 horses. Its ceiling soared unseen, lost in shadow, but through a ragged split in the rock far overhead, where land and sky had sundered in some ancient quake. Moonlight filtered, a pale spear striking the black pool beneath. That water stretched almost shore to shore, its surface perfectly still. A sleeping obsidian mirror. A narrow bank ran along one edge, where an old skiff decayed, half sunk into silt. Broken oars jutted from the mud like snapped bones. 2 other passages emptied into the cavern from opposite sides. Down one came faint torchlight, voices, and the muffled clank of armor. Down the other drifted nothing but wind. Sandor cursed softly. They found the smuggler's exit. Arya peered up, measuring the moon's height through the cleft. That gap must open near the streets. They'll seal it or drop nets, Sandor said. Won't matter if we reach the rush first. Tyrion jingled his manacles. We reach the rush how? That boat's more holes than hull. Arya's eyes found the pillar-like stalagmites rising from the water near the far wall. Ancient timbers jutted among them, the half-collapsed ribs of an even older pier. Tethered to a post lay another skiff, smaller but intact, its hull tarred and oiled. The rope was new, the pitch still fragrant. Someone had used that boat recently. She pointed. There. Voices burst louder from the soldier-lit passage. Commands barked, steel drawn. A lantern's glare bobbed, then brightened. Sansa gasped. Sandor zeitzed her elbow and shoved her toward the water's edge. Run. They splashed into the shallows. Mud sucked at boots, gowns, greaves. Tyrion hissed when his chains snagged on a hidden root. Shay knelt to pry them free while Arya darted ahead, blade thin and sure. She vaulted onto the skiff, nearly toppling into the black pool, and steadied herself. The craft bobbed but held. Oars lay across its thwarts. A bundle of netting filled the bow. She cast off rope and shoved the hull closer to shore. Sandor lifted Sansa bodily, depositing her aboard with a grunt. Next, he grabbed Shay, and she bit back a cry as she landed beside Sansa. Tyrion clambered without aid, swinging his fettered legs awkwardly over the gunwale. Arya turned, arm extended. The tunnel erupted with torchlight. 2 lancers charged, boots spraying water. Sandor wheeled, spear thrusting. The first lance skewered empty air. Sandor's spear butt smashed the man's temple. He fell limply, helmet ringing like a cracked bell. The second guard slashed a sword across Sandor's thigh. Steel met chain, sparking. Sandor snarled, drove his gauntleted fist into the guard's throat, and kicked him beneath the water until bubbles ceased. Boat, he barked. 2 more shapes sprinted from the passage. Arrows zipped, one whipping past Arya's ear. She flung herself flat as Sandor leaped aboard, rocking the skiff dangerously. Oars dipped, water surged, the boat lurched free. Arya seized one oar, while Sandor gripped the other. They rowed with desperate vigor, each pull slicing the water's glassy membrane. Arrows clattered on rock around them, but distance stole the soldiers' aim. Soon torches at the shore dwindled to candle sparks, eclipsed by cavern gloom. The current quickened beneath their hull. A low roar reached them, water spilling through a stone sluice. The skiff yawed toward that sound. Tyrion twisted to look over the stern. I trust this sluice emerges someplace navigable. It empties beneath the river cliffs. Arya returned between oar strokes. Beyond, the antler gate peered. Shay shuddered. That drop, how high? Higher than the wall, Arya admitted, but the water's deep. Sandor barked a laugh. Good, we'll wash clean of this dung heap in one dunk. A rumble answered him. The cavern narrowed into a tunnel whose walls churned with currents. The skiff sped toward it, drawn as if by a monstrous mouth. Spray broke against the prow, cool and stinging. Sansa clutched the gunwale, knuckles white. Shay clung to Tyrion, who tried to shield her with his own frail body. The sluice engulfed them. Darkness swallowed daylight entire. The roar became deafening. Arya's stomach dropped as the hull slid onto a swift, smooth incline, cutting through foaming water like an arrow loosed from Winterfell's ramparts. Sandor whooped. Oars swept uselessly. The current decided their fate. A heartbeat later, the incline ended. They erupted from the tunnel mouth into night air, suspended for one impossibly long instant over a churning cauldron of black. Moonlight sculpted each figure in silver relief. The hound's ragged hair whipped back. Tyrion's chains flared outward. Sansa's braid lashed like a banner. Then gravity reclaimed them. The skiff slapped the river, smacking spray to the height of a tree. It shuddered violently, yet did not break. Arya landed sprawled across a thwart. Breath punched from her lungs. Cold water crashed over her, numbing flesh. She rolled, coughing, and resumed her seat. Sandor already had the oars again, bellowing for balance. They rode the shockwave west, swiveling to face the city. King's Landing glittered up the distant hillside, every tower ringed with torchlight, every gate ablaze with confusion. Flames danced across the great sept rooftop, throwing stark red stripes into the sky. Bells still tolled, though now their cadence faltered, as if the city's heart could not decide between mourning and wrath. Tyrion fixed his eyes on those walls, lips parted in something like sorrow. A pity, he muttered. All my finest pun lies undone by one single truth. Kings die. The realm pretends surprise each time. Spare us philosophy, Sandor said. Where now, she-wolf? Arya scanned the riverbanks. North lay the docks, thick with Lannister sentries and Tyrell bowmen. South bank sloped into marshy flats, where fishermen stilted their shacks above tides that stunk of reeds and rot. In that gloom flickered only a handful of lanterns, swinging lazy amid the breeze. A cluster of masts bobbed, unattended. She pointed downstream. See the shallows where cattails bend. We land there. Then find a cart road that hugs the coast past the honeywine warehouses. Horses keep there for grain haulage. Roads washed, Tyrion warned. Cersei will fan every outpost come dawn. Then we ride now, Arya replied. Before the sun nicks the horizon. Sansa leaned into her. I will slow you. This gown. Arya unsheathed a dinner knife she'd pilfered and sliced a long strip from Sansa's hem. Tie it up, she said, demonstrating how to loop fabric around knees. Sansa obeyed. Shay ripped free another fold for herself. Sandor steered toward the reeds. The skiff scraped mud. They spilled overboard into knee-deep muck, hauling the boat clear so its hull would not reflect torchlight. Reeds hissed around them. Frogs croaked somewhere unseen. The night smelled of algae and distant smoke. Arya motioned them low. They crouched through the reeds, skirting pools alive with fireflies. Above, the spine of the Blackwater Bridge fanned lanterns like jewels, but no watch posted on this stretch glanced their way. Either they had not been described or no one expected fugitives to choose the slow, muddy escape over the paved roads. ARYA counted heartbeats anyway, slipping forward only when clouds masked the moon. Soon the marsh yielded to firmer ground. A narrow cart road cut west between hedges. Heavy ruts testified to grain wagons bound for King's Landing's hungry mouths. The hour was late but not dead. Somewhere beyond a rise, hooves clopped, and a teamster muttered to his mules. ARYA froze the group as the wagon creaked by, the driver's lantern swinging across brambles. He saw nothing but night. When the road emptied again, they climbed a low fence into an orchard of twisted plum trees. Here Sandor halted, scanning gaps in the foliage. "Shelter first," he said. "Horse thieves, this close to the city, will draw steel. We need coin to buy mounts." Tyrion jangled his chains. "Were these not adornment, I might oblige, but I dare say my purse remains in Cersei's ample bosom. Now, Shay nudged the satchel she carried. "I took what I could when they dragged you away. 40 silver stags, some coppers. Not near enough for 5 horses." Sandor scoffed. "Enough for 2 nags maybe, and a half sack of oats if the hostler's drunk." ARYA tapped her chin, mind scampering. "We don't need 5 mounts, we need 1 cart team. No innkeeper outside the city will think twice at a farmhand family bound for the Reach. 2 horses, a wagon, and tarpaulin. Sansa and Shay can ride hidden, chains we bury under hay." Tyrion considered. "Assuming a farmer wakes tonight, knocks, and agrees to part with his livelihood for less than it's worth, all while ignoring a burnt dog's head and armed child." Sandor stepped closer to him. "If coin won't sway him, maybe my face will." Sansa blanched. "No killing, please." Sandor's grin looked wolfish. "Then pray the farmer loves silver." They skirted the orchard to a thatched cottage whose chimney exhaled faint smoke. A stable leaned beside, doors unlatched. Moonlight revealed 2 sturdy brown mares within, half drowsed in their stalls. A battered wagon waited, shafts cracked but serviceable. ARYA whispered her plan. Tyrion and Shay stayed hidden in shadow while she, Sansa, and Sandor crept to the stable. The mares huffed as Sandor's bulk entered. He soothed them with low murmurs surprisingly gentle, hands stroking velvet muzzles. ARYA sifted tack until she found bridles, yokes, a canvas tarp folded across a hay bale. Sansa rolled an empty barrel to block the view from the cottage. Outside, a plank squeaked. Sandor froze, hand on dagger. Footsteps approached, crunching straw. An old man shuffled around the corner, lantern raised, bald head shining. "Stormin' about here," he barked, blinking. His gaze fixed on Sandor's immense shadow, then the smaller shapes behind. The lantern rattled. "Or you?" ARYA stepped forward, leaning into a posture of exhaustion. "Please, good father," she said, voice pitched soft. "My sister was cast from court. We only need the road." The old man squinted, lowering the lantern for a clearer view. Sansa tugged her torn mantle forward, eyes downcast. Sandor loomed behind them, silent but present. The farmer saw the burn scars, saw the steel. He licked cracked lips. "Roads closed past the mill. Gold cloaks. Said rebels struck the keep." ARYA saw the fear flash behind his annoyance. She fished a silver stag from her pocket. "We can pay." He eyed the coin, then them. "Hire a wagon, hind and half cart. Ay, and feed for the mares." 5 silver, he said quickly. 1, ARYA countered, flipping a second coin as if she had many more. "Keep your skin. It's worth more than wheels." Sandor let a breath hiss through his teeth. as though displeased. The farmer gulped. 2, then. Take your pick and be gone. What? Arya dropped both coins into his palm. Ropes and tarpaulin too. He nodded, shuffling aside. Together they harnessed the mares and rolled the wagon into the orchard lane. Tyrion and Shay emerged, the dwarf bowing low to their benefactor. May the gods multiply your fortune, my good man. Possibly by theft, but multiply nonetheless. The farmer ignored him, hurrying back to bolt his door. Sansa helped Shay climb under the tarp. Tyrion lay beside her, chains clinking softly. Sandor took reins. Arya hopped onto the bench, and they rattled out under the trees. Mist crawled in from the river, veiling their passage. Far behind, the capital's glow pulsed like a forge, never banked. Arya watched it dwindle, a red star bleeding on the horizon. She knew rage still lived there, men who had murdered her father. Men who would hunt her sister, men who would tear the world apart to keep a golden crown shining. She laid a hand on the bone needle inside her sleeve. Its point pressed lovingly into her skin, binding promise to blood. One king had fallen. Others would follow. The wagon reached the larger King's Road by dawn, a ribbon of packed loam that wound along the storm-lashed coast. Ocean fog wreathed the cliffs, masking their progress. Sandor drove until the sun rimmed the sea in pink. Birds cried overhead, gulls circling in search of fishing barges that would never sail today. The harbor remained under martial law, its nets and boats commandeered for palace patrols. Here, at the kingdom's rim, only the wheeling gulls told of war. They passed an abandoned shrine to the mother where votive candles guttered in sea wind. Sansa begged a halt. Arya obliged, helping her down. They knelt before the stone relief, the mother cradling a babe whose face-time had eroded. Sansa whispered into cupped hands. Arya closed her eyes but spoke no prayers. She had given those once and watched the gods ignore them. Yet as she rose, she touched the statue's chipped foot in silent acknowledgement. Back on the wagon, Tyrion had freed one hand by working a link against the axle's edge until the chain snapped. Blood welled from his wrist where iron bit deep, but his grin was triumphant. "Imps make poor pets," he said, tossing the length of chain into the ditch. "Now for the other, too." Arya found him a shard of pottery. He wedged it into the rivet, twisting until the cuff sprang. Shay bound the raw skin with a strip torn from her shift. Tyrion flexed fingers tingling from returning blood. "Free hands, free purse," he declared, rifling Shay's satchel. He counted silver, dividing among them. "Consider this investment seed. Wolves, hounds, and dwarfs shall harvest later." Sandor urged the mares into a trot. "Where harvest be?" Tyrion stared down the road, eyes narrowing as though he could see leagues away. "East lies storm, west lies reach, north lies war. To survive, we require none of those. But south, there is Dorne, where bastards suffer no shame, where women rule courts, where wine flows sweeter than revenge, and its prince owes me a favor or three." Arya tilted her head. "I thought we ride to River Run, fine mother." "River Run sits in ruin," Tyrion answered softly. "Your uncle Edmure languishes in chains. Your mother's whereabouts?" "She's alive," Arya insisted. "Perhaps," he allowed. "Yet Lannister banners fly from those towers and Freys hold the crossings. March a wagon there, and it becomes a mobile gallows." Sansa's voice tentative, the eerie. "Jon Arryn's widow promised me safety once. Lady Lysa locked her gates before her shared blood," Tyrion said, "and now trembles at each raven. She will not harbor the sister of regicide." Arya glanced at Sandor. His grimace gave no answer. She chewed the inside of her cheek, tasting iron. "Winterfell then, sea or no sea, marsh or wall, that's home." Tyrion sighed, rubbing his wrist. Kingdom abhors a void. The north is fractured among Boltons, Ironborn, and Wildling Embers. By the time you reach it, you may find wolves wearing flayed man cloaks. Then we unflay them. Sandor chuckled, low and appreciative. Girls got bite. Morning aged into afternoon. They avoided villages large enough to host garrisons, trading 2 silver stags for a basket of crab apples at a roadside stall run by a woman too weary to ask questions. Birds quieted as clouds rolled, pregnant with rain. At a ford, they let the mares drink, and ARYA splashed water on her face, gasping at its cold bite. Sansa combed mud from her braid with fingers until it looked almost tidy. Shay rested her head on Tyrion's shoulder, but behind her eyelids flinched the same nightmares ARYA knew too well. Chains, lashes, laughter. Miles later, as drizzle began, they spotted a stone inn perched where a spur road forked south. An unassuming place leaning crooked against a wind-gnarled oak. Smoke curled from its chimney. A faded sign dangled. The Boar and Barnacle. 2 merchant wagons stood outside, tarps weighted by wet sandbags. No banners, no guards, only a stable boy mucking piles with absent mind. Sandor halted the wagon beside a hedgerow. Shelter or snare? Shelter, Tyrion decided, eyes gleaming. Ale will warm bones, roofs dry lashes, rumor feed minds. We ride at dusk. Sansa glanced at her ragged gown. They will know us. Not if we alter the show, ARYA said. She stripped off her tunic, revealing the rough homespun shift beneath, then shrugged the tunic onto Sansa. It hung loose, but serviceable. From the wagon tarp she cut a hooded slit for herself, cinching it with rope. Shay borrowed Arya's ash-gray dress. Tyrion smeared mud across Sandor's helm to dull the steel. In mirror puddles they studied their new guises, farm folk laden with orchard wares. Inside the inn, the air smelled of smoke, onions, and sour ale. Few patrons, 2 teamsters soaking bread and stew, a hedge knight dozing, the innkeep polishing mugs. No bright doublets, no sigils. Their entrance drew scant interest, until Tyrion climbed onto a stool. The innkeep's brows rose. You lost a fight with a goat dwarf? Several goats, Tyrion said, and a goat-headed king. Ale, if it please. Coin first. Tyrion tossed a stag. The innkeep bit it, shrugged, poured 6 tankards. Sansa sipped delicately. ARYA gulped, letting malt cut the iron film coating her throat. Rain drummed the roof, a soothing rattle masking any distant thunder of riders or horns. A hooded traveler by the hearth watched them over steepled fingers. His cloak bore needle-fine embroidery of lavender stalks. Brave Aussie work. ARYA tensed. Men from Bravos remembered debts, but he merely nodded once at Tyrion, as though in silent salute, and returned to his cup. They secured a private corner near the kitchen, and devoured plates of turnip stew thick with barley. Sandor swept bread crusts across the table, hungry as the wolves on his shield long gone. Tyrion negotiated for goat cheese, and while the innkeep fetched it, the dwarf whispered, "Listen." In the common thrumming of spoons, ARYA recognized the hush of talk carrying rumor. The teamsters argued whether Mace Tyrell seized the Red Keep or whether Stannis had used sorcery to slay Joffrey from afar. One insisted Renly's ghost led armored roses through the gate of the gods. Another spat, swearing by salt that the imp had slit the king's throat and fed the corpse to his pet shadow cat. Each tale more ludicrous than the last, yet from the insanity, truths twinkled. Cersei's orders for immediate blockade, the execution of Pycelle's novice for whispering poison, the disappearance of Sansa Stark. Sansa flinched when her name passed their lips. Tyrion laid his hand over hers. Rumor outraces ravens. By dawn, our faces will brand every road, post, pontoon. So we must break the flank, Sandor said. Night rides faster. Rain eased to drizzle. The innkeep accepted another coin to keep silent. They slipped from the yard as the hedge knight burped ale froth, and the Braavosi traveler extinguished his pipe with measured breath. Back on the road they turned south at Tyrion's urging, following a lesser path that snaked toward rolling dunes. Land flattened into scrub and sedge. Storm clouds parted to reveal a bruised sunset, violet on the horizon. The air smelled of brine. Somewhere beyond dunes crashed waves that had touched shores as far as Lie. At dusk, they found an abandoned watchtower. Roof collapsed, walls half devoured by ivy. They watered the mares at a nearby pool, then tethered them in the tower's lee. Inside the ruin, broken stairs spiraled to nowhere, but the hearth still stood, stones blackened by old fires. ARYA gathered driftwood bleached white by sun and set tinder. Sandor struck spark, and soon flame flickered, painting amber on crumbling mortar. They huddled close. Shadows danced behind them, merging, separating. Rain hissed on the tower's open crown, but could not quench the blaze. Sansa dozed against Arya's shoulder. Shay stretched near Tyrion, humming a lullaby from the Free Cities. Sandor stood guard at the archway, silhouette stark against lightning flickers in the far west. For the first time, ARYA allowed her lids to fall, lashes heavy with exhaustion. Sleep approached, unsure, like a wolf cub edging toward a campfire it did not trust. But ARYA coaxed it, letting memories recede until only the crackle of flame and her sister's breathing remained. In that fragile peace, she dreamed not of lists or swords, nor of dead kings with purple faces. She dreamed of snow-soft nights in Winterfell, of her brothers chasing through the godswood, of hot bread from the kitchens and old Nan's hushed warnings about the ice spiders who came with the long night. She woke to ivory dawn glimmering through the ruined arch. A gull cried overhead. Beside her, Sansa stirred, brushing ash from her hair. Tyrion and Shay still slept entwined, their rising chests calm. Beyond the doorway, Sandor leaned on his spear, eyes slitted but awake. He greeted her with a grunt. Roads quiet. Hoofprints passed north hours ago. 6 riders. None returned. Arya stretched, joints aching. We move. They broke camp quickly. No breakfast, but apples, and what bread remained. The mares shook rein from manes. Dunes shimmered under pale sun, sand streaked with dark veins of wet. The coast road ahead forked, one branch hugging cliffs, the other diving inland toward vineyards green with early summer. Tyrion pointed inland. That track meets the Rosby High Road, then splits south for Dorne. Farms, Sandor noted, fresh watch posts, also taverns, honest merchants, and caravans whose tarpaulins hide fugitives as well as wine amphorae. Arya studied the horizon. Inland lay heat and strangers. Along the cliffs, seabirds and solitude. She weighed her oath to return north against the logic of disappearing where Lannister eyes seldom looked. The red sands of Sunspear. She thought of Nymeria, the wolf who ran free somewhere in those endless forests between rivers and vale. Wolves traveled far, but always turned homeward in the end. She faced Sansa. Your choice, she said. North or south? Sansa's gaze traveled from Arya's fierce expression to the grieving dwarf, then to the burned knight. Tears welled, but she blinked them back. I choose life, she whispered. If that road gives it, we take it. South, then. They rolled inland beneath a sky whitening with heat. The land undulated into fertile plains, where fields quivered with barley and grapevines marched in tidy ranks. Peasants raised eyes as the wagon rattled past, but offered no challenge. A roadside shrine bore freshly cut garlands to the 7. Sansa left a plum, ARYA a pebble smoothed in river wash. Sandor scoffed at piety, Yet Arya saw him pause, tracing the stranger's carved mask with one rough finger. By midday, they neared a bustling market hamlet, where olive trees dotted hillsides and goats clambered among twisted roots. Brown tents lined the square. Hawkers advertised wheels of cheese, copper pans, strings of figs, bolts of saffron-dyed cloth. The scents, rosemary, smoke, goat droppings, mingled in heavy air. Tyrion suggested supplies. Water skins, salt pork, a file for chains, should more need cutting. They agreed. Arya remained with Sansa in the wagon, while Sandor and Shay haggled. Tyrion limped to a wine-seller's booth, sampling vintage and gossip alike. Children chased each other, shouting, flinging reeds as swords. The lilt of their laughter pierced Arya's armor, stirring echoes of Bran scaling towers, of Rickon hiding in kennels to startle maids. She blinked away the ache. A commotion rose near the well. A man on a roan horse shouted, brandishing a parchment. "King's bounty," he bellowed. "Queen Regent offers 100 golden dragons for news of the imp and the Lady Sansa Stark. Traitors to the crown." Villagers pressed close, craning to view the sketch, crude but recognizable. Arya's heart hammered. She pulled Sansa deeper under the tarp. Tyrion reappeared, wine jug swinging, and froze. His eyes followed the shouting rider. He backed into a shadowed stall. Sandor returned laden with sacks. Shay hurried behind. "Bounties posted," Sandor muttered. "We leave." Yet the rider spotted them, maybe drawn by a flicker of recognition in Tyrion's gait. Maybe by fate's cruel mirth. "You there! Halt!" he called, spurring the roan. Villagers turned. Sandor's spear flashed. He struck the mare's shoulder, not mortal but shocking. It reared, dumping the rider. Sandor vaulted atop the fallen man, fist cracking helm. Panic swept the market. Stalls toppled. Goats bleated. Tyrion grabbed Arya's arm, dragging her toward the wagon. "Drive?" Arya scrambled aboard, snatched reins. Sansa braced. Shay leapt, hauling Tyrion with her. Sandor swung onto the tail, pounding the side twice. Arya whipped the mares. They surged, wheels jolting over cobbles. Vendors screamed. The roan scrambled up, bucked free. Chaos scattering like dice across the square. Guards emerged from a barracks, drawing crossbows. Arrows hissed after them. One sank into sackcloth, the mare on the right flank. She squealed, stumbling. Arya snapped reins again, urging her on. The wound bled dark, but adrenaline fueled the beast's flight. The wagon careened through an alley, barrel lids flying from cargo heaps, children scattering. Out beyond the village limits, the path split again. One branched deeper into vine country, the other hugging a ridgeline drifting south. Arya yanked the team left, trusting higher ground and rock to slow pursuit. Sandor tossed sacks to lighten weight. Bread and salt pork burst across the road. Tyrion clung, chains forgotten, laugh half hysterical. "Lions on our heels, dragons in the sky, does the song improve?" "Shut your mouth," Sandor barked, slamming fist into plank for emphasis. They raced up the ridge until the village shrank to a cluster of tile roofs. In the distance, riders mounted, streaming after. Sansa paled. Shay prayed to a foreign god. Arya spotted a gap in the stone wall skirting a terraced olive grove. "Hold." She steered the wagon through, splinters cartwheeling. Trees enclosed them, short, thick-trunked, branches dense. The ground between terraces dipped steeply, barely a goat path. She whipped reins again. The mares plunged. They skidded down loose gravel, wheels skidding. Sandor braced the wagon's side to keep it upright. Olive branches clawed their faces, ripping cloth. Tyrion cursed as a low limb smacked his brow. The hidden path zigzagged to the valley floor where a dry creek snaked through rock. Arya halted in the creek bed. muzzle foam flecking Sackcloth's chest. The other mare heaved, flanks quivering. Above on the ridge, dust plumed. Riders searched, but could not easily spot them among twisted olive shade. ARYA held breath. One helmet glinted in sunlight, scanning. Then the riders urged mounts along the main road south, assuming quarry still fled before them. Silence fell, except for the mare's ragged breaths. ARYA stroked Sackcloth, checking the arrow. Shaft narrow, head barbed but shallow. She snapped the arrow behind the head and slid the tip its length, freeing it. Sackcloth whinnied but did not collapse. Water remained only in puddles from last night's rain. They stripped sacks to stanch bleeding, tore more shift cloth to bandage. Tyrion fetched a clay flask of strong wine to drizzle over the wound. The mare shuddered but stood. They abandoned the wagon. Its noise would betray them. Instead, Sandor cut the shafts free, fashioned a makeshift travois from saplings lashed with rope, and loaded supplies atop. Shay found olives ripe enough to eat. Tyrion scavenged fallen figs. They drank from the creek where water seeped beneath stones. By nightfall, they reached a ruined villa, half swallowed by ivy. Columns toppled, mosaic floors cracked, yet cistern intact. They camped within the old peristyle garden where moonlit statues of forgotten gods leaned at drunken angles. Sandor picketed the mares beside a fountain, dry for centuries. ARYA explored corridors open to starshine, blades of grass poking between tiles, depicting olives and doves. She found a marble bench and sat, heart oddly calm despite the day's chase. Footsteps padded behind. Sansa sank beside her. They stared at a statue of a woman pouring water from twin amphorae, the stone chipped so her face resembled a skull. For a long while neither spoke. "Do you hate me?" Sansa asked, voice small. ARYA blinked. "Why would I? I was blind in the Red Keep, blinded by songs, by silks. I stood beside Joffrey while they..." She broke, tears shining. ARYA shook her head. "I wanted to hate you," she admitted. "Back then. But hate needs space to grow. All I had was cages and roads and lists. I filled every inch." She swallowed. "But you went on it, Sansa." "Never. My..." Sansa covered her mouth, sobbing softly. ARYA wrapped an arm around her, unsure, awkward. They leaned into each other in broken silence until Sansa's tears slowed. "You saved me," Sansa whispered. "We saved each other," ARYA corrected. "And we will again." They sat until dew chilled the marble, then returned to the central courtyard, where Shay slept curled against Tyrion's side, his cloak draped over them both. Sandor hunched by the fountain, sharpening dagger on whetstone, sparks tiny meteors in night. His burnt face bathed red with each flare. He nodded at the sisters without ceasing. The next dawn began a week of cautious travel. They skirted markets, followed goat tracks, hid in caves when patrols thundered by. Rain visited twice, washing dust from their clothes and cooling sackcloths wound, which healed surprisingly fast. Tyrion reduced the mare's burden by selling silver cups to a hermit whose hillside shrine glittered with stolen spoils. In trade they gained linen bandages, dried fish, and a weather-cracked map of Dornish passes. Each sunset they counted fresh rumors. Stannis sailing again. Tyrell banners marching north. Prince Oberyn demanding justice for his sister's murder anew. The Greatjon rallying in the Wolfswood. The Iron Bank freezing Lannister debt. But every mouth that spread gossip also spoke of the imp and the Stark girl. Bounties doubled, then trebled. Gold cloaks spread along every king's road, their descriptions whispered to village elders. One twilight they camped in a quarry where marble blocks lay half-hewn, abandoned when plague took the workers. Tyrion used chalk to sketch their route, followed the Rosby High Road south until the marches, crossed the Boneway under night, seek the pass called the Prince's Peak, and from there drop into the green valleys of the Yronwood domain, where Vulture King legends still haunt. A day's ride beyond, the walls of Sunspear glimmered white against the Sea of Dorn. "The Red Viper," Tyrion said, tapping a chalk snake he'd drawn coiled around his son. "He detests injustice more than he loves wine, and that love is considerable. With his sponsorship, we may barter clemency for truth. That Cersei's accusations ring hollow." "None." Sandor spat grit. "And if he sells us for crown favor, then we poison his wine as well," Arya said. Tyrion chuckled. The wolf pup grins. Days later, the road emptied into the marches. A vast expanse of hills riddled with gorse and broom, leaves silvered by perpetual wind. Here stood watchtowers every 2 miles, their banners flapping, black and gold of House Fowler, green and blue of House Jourdain, purple hail of House Blackmont. Though these lords bent knee to Sunspear, they owed fealty first to their own coin. Bounty hunters prowled like jackals. At dusk, an inn crowned a ridge. Torches burned bright, promising stew, beer, beds. But the yard swarmed with horses. Among them glinted helms too polished for common sellswords. Lannister outriders. They veered instead to a shepherd's cote lower on the slope, offering a copper for lodging. The shepherd glimpsed the hound's scars and waved them in, free. He served mutton, cooked with cheap wine, and while they ate, Arya eavesdropped. The shepherd claimed Lannister goldcloaks, searched for a rebel who slew their king with sorcery, a guerrilla assassin wielding a wolf's ghost. "She rides with a burned butcher and the dwarf demon," he hushed. "Has a blade that sings." Arya traded glances with Sandor. Truth warped into legend faster than wildfire's flash. She excused herself to check the mares, mind racing. Each hour twisted rumor further, until soon any small girl with a blade might hang. Morning dawned, blood red. Clouds massed over the Boneway, knife-sharp peaks forming the gate between Dornish independence and the rest of Westeros. They would cross today, or die on slopes. Tyrion proposed separating, he and Shay disguised as wine peddlers on the main pass, Sandor guiding the Stark sisters over a smuggler's mule track, known only to goats and outlaws. They would regroup at Ghost Hill on the far side. Arya protested, but Sandor judged it sound. 2 ducks in 1 barrel, easier shot. Sansa clutched Arya's hand yet nodded. She would not chain her sister's destiny to her own fear. And Shay whispered that Lannister men seldom searched wine carts too closely. When a pretty girl giggled from the driver's plank, they divided supplies. Tyrion rode sackcloth, lighter since the wound. Shay took the other mare. Sandor led the Starks on foot, following cairns that zigzagged fissures where sun never touched. They climbed hours through shale that slid beneath boots, each step echoing into chasms. At a notch crest, they looked back to river plains shimmering gold and green. Ahead, the Boneway plunged into mist. Sandor paused beside Arya. "You'd lead fine without me now," he said, voice gruffer than usual. "But roads grow rougher yet. Keep knife ready." She met his eyes, seeing weariness behind the scorched ruin. "After dawn, north," he answered. "Or east, away from crowns." She nodded. They descended. Clouds swallowed them, world narrowing to slippery gray switchbacks. Above, a hawk cried and vanished in fog. Somewhere, stones clattered. Perhaps hooves, perhaps rockfall. Sandor tensed, pushing Arya and Sansa against cliff as 3 riders exploded from a bend. Sellswords wearing half Lannister crimson, half Fleur green. They reined at sight of the sisters, eyes wide with recognition. One reached for a horn. Sandor struck first. His spear lanced the nearest man's ribcage, ripping him from saddle. Arya dashed forward, bone needle slashing hamstring of the hornblower. He screamed, blade falling. The 3rd rider spurred past, panic flaring. Sansa flung a loose stone, striking the horse's flank. It reared, dumping its rider over the precipice. The man's shriek echoed long before silence swallowed it. Breaths misted. Blood steamed on shale. Sansa stared at her stone-stained hand. Sandor dragged the bodies into a crevice, stripping cloaks for warmth. "Few more crows but much meat," he said gruffly. They pressed on. Fog thinned near sunset, revealing distant dunes, redder than any they had known. The smell of cinnamon dust carried on hot wind. Sunspear's promise beckoned. Refuge or trap dressed as safety. Atop the final ridge, under an indigo sky, Arya watched the sisters' shadows stretch long into Dorne's twilight. One hand traced the wolf's head ring she had taken from father's trunk years ago, hidden all this time. She slipped it onto Sansa's finger without a word. Sansa squeezed back, and together they descended toward a future neither winter nor lions could claim unchallenged. Behind them, the Boneway swallowed the day's last light, sealing shut upon the dead and the hunted alike. Ahead, a red sun kissed the dunes, and somewhere beyond, the sea sang of exile, vengeance, and the long, uncertain road home. Sandor guided them down the last ragged spine of the Boneway in silence, each step releasing small avalanches of shale that clattered into the canyons below. The slope grew gentler only by degrees. Stunted pines clung to ledges, their needles dusted with crimson grit that drifted on the hot wind, rising from the Dornish flats. Sansa's skirts, now hacked to the knee in uneven strips, caught on every thorn, but she bore the scrapes without complaint. Arya watched her sisters as twilight spread. Exhaustion hollowed Sansa's cheeks, yet the lines of fear that once framed her mouth had softened into something less brittle, almost resolute. The stone wolf, old Nan might have called her, cracked but stubborn under storms. They camped at the first scrub-lined dell that offered a trickle of water, no thicker than a child's finger. Sandor hacked branches from a twisted juniper and built a fire that smoked fiercely but burned slow. The heat carried the scent of resin and olives. Moths, the color of ash, drifted through the smoke, dazzled by the glow. Dinner was figs bruised in travel, a heel of cheese, and at Sandor's insistence, thin slices from the jerky stolen off one of the Boneway patrol riders. The dried meat tasted of saddle leather and old blood. Still, it filled bellies. When darkness deepened, Arya took watch, pacing the dell's lip with needle unsheathed, and the bone stiletto tucked behind her ear like a smith's quill. Stars overhead seemed strangely brilliant, sharp pinpricks, unlike the softer gleam above the King's Road. Perhaps the dry air cut them clearer. Perhaps freedom whetted her senses. The wind whispered through broom grass with voices too faint to parse. She liked that, a hush untroubled by the clank of armor or the groan of wagon wheels. She spent part of the watch practicing footwork on the packed slope. Left, right, turn, thrust. Jaqen's silent mantra of rhythm without sound. Her shadow followed, stretching long beneath the moon. With each step she pictured faces. Cersei's cold fury, Meryn Trant's smug jowls, Ilyn Payne's ruined grin. Joffrey's corpse had wiped one name from her list, but more remained, and now a new one. The masked rider who'd offered a bounty in the olive market. He wore no crest she recognized, yet the cruelty in his voice had branded itself on her memory. Perhaps he was just another sellsword, but sellswords could bleed as readily as kings. At dawn, thin clouds painted salmon streaks across the eastern sky. The old Jerboan road unfurled at the valley bottom, a ribbon of ochre gravel yawning into desert. Two figures trudged along it, leading the mares. Tyrion in a round-brimmed straw hat, pilfered from some barn, and Shay veiled in a scarf bright enough to shame a Tyroshi pillow-talk dancer. They waved when they saw Arya's shape on the rise. Reunions were quiet. They dared no shouts. but the clasp of Sansa's hands around Tyrion spoke gratitude that needed no tongue. The dwarf's chains had vanished, replaced by braided rawhide bracelets that hid the scars. "A gift," he said, "from a Ronwood toll warden who'd drunk half their wine and forgotten why he'd stopped the cart in the first place." Tyrion came bearing tidings. Merchant caravans clogged the road south, fleeing talk of Lannister vengeance and Tyrell expansion. Queen Margaery had declared her brother Ser Loras regent until Tommen's maturity or the crown's confirmation by Lords Spiritual. Cersei, barred from court by Tyrell guards, was rumored to have retreated to Casterly Rock, calling banners and whispering of a lion guard thrice the size of her father's. In King's Landing, Tywin's body lay in state beneath the Red Keep. Hearts stopped in the night of Joffrey's passing. Some called it grief, some claimed poison, others blasphemed daggers of doom. Nobody knew truth from terror. Power, Tyrion concluded, is a cloak stitched from rumor. Tug one thread, and it flutters. Tug another, and it tears. None. Enough cloth talk, Sandor grunted. Road, biding. They set out after burying the fire's coals beneath a cairn of loose stone. The Jerboan road sloped across arid terraces where lizards sunned upon quartz and little white flowers, pushed through dust like stars fallen to earth. Heat rose quickly. They wrapped heads in scarves, mouths in linen. Arya soaked a kerchief in the trickle creek and draped it under her hair. The moisture cooled for a precious hour, then baked away. Sandor doled water from water skins each mile, counting swallows. Even Tyrion, usually chatty, fell into silence, his laughter parched to a rasp. Just past midday, they spied the first fortress of Ghost Hill, a low bastion of tawny stone crouching atop a sun-bleached ridge, banners of House Toland curling in the furnace wind. Its sigil, a ghostly green dragon eating its own tail, looked barely alive under the glare. A company of spearmen guarded the gate, their helms shaped like narrow viper heads. When the travelers approached, guards crossed pikes. Sandor's burned visage drew wary hands toward sword hilts, but Tyrion stepped forward with a dwarf's polite bow and produced a waxed parchment, an open letter of passage given by the toll warden bearing Lord Ronwood's seal. The captain, a lean, dark-eyed woman whose cheeks bore twin scars, read it, looked the party over, then curled her lip at the hound. "The warden of the Stoneway guarantees safe conduct," she said in clipped common. "But inside Ghost Hill you spill no steel. Dornish law is guest law. Guest law is for those with lords." Sandor spat red grit. "I'm no lord's dog." "Then behave like a pilgrim and not a cur." She jerked her chin. The pikes lifted. Inside, Ghost Hill bustled with refugees, small folk from the Stormlands bearing bundles tied with rope, Carthene traders sporting silk turbans, even a pair of silent sisters guiding a mule laden with corpses pickled in salt. The fortress itself was less a castle than a sprawling caravanserai, courtyards linked by vaulted halls, shaded by linen awnings dyed sea blue. Cisterns gurgled with captured rainwater, filtered through marble chips. Date palms sprouted in orderly rows. Bees hummed around clusters of white blossoms. Children's laughter floated from the public bath where they splashed naked. The sight of everyday life, unbroken by war, tightened something in Sansa's chest until she had to rest against a palm and breathe slow to keep tears from spilling. Arya prowled the market arcades, absorbing the smells. Cloves, goat soap, sun-cured fish, wine so dark it looked black. She kept one hand inside her jerkin, fingers tracing the garrote's wire. Instinct warned her that even in paradise hunters stalked. An elderly washerwoman offered to launder their dust-caked clothes for 2 coppers and a story. Tyrion obliged with a bawdy joke about a sand Dornish man who mistook a heat mirage for an oasis full of bare-breasted maidens. The washerwoman cackled and waved them toward a shaded courtyard. There, They rented an alcove. Open stone floor. Reed mats, no doors. Sansa was half asleep against Shay's shoulder when drum beats throbbed through the evening air, summoning curious eyes toward the central square. An impromptu procession marched under lanterns. Dornish spearmen parading a wicker effigy of death, its face painted green like wildfire. At the rear strode a singular figure in crimson robes, twin daggers tucked into a sash. Sir Harmon Uller, envoy of Sunspear, dispatched to spread the news that Prince Oberyn Martell had accepted the title of Hand, pro tempore, and would ride to King's Landing to demand trial of those who wronged his house. Crowd cheers rose, an undercurrent of vengeance in every roar. Tyrion watched from a column's shadow, lips thin. My sister and uncle are dead, my father cold on marble, and the Viper's claws are out. The game ripens fast. Then we join his table before others salt it, Arya said, surprising herself with political imagery she barely understood. We must reach Sunspear before Oberyn departs. Tyrion agreed. Prove our usefulness. For that we'll need swift mounts, not plodding mares. Sandor spat. And coin. Coin, repeated a soft voice. The washerwoman had returned, clothes neatly folded in a basket. From the shadows behind her stepped a tall, reedy man, wearing a loose robe, striped in lavender and gray. His salt and pepper beard framed a mouth curved in wry amusement. I might furnish both, he said, if I could borrow your story for a moment, little lion. Tyrion's eyes narrowed. And you are a man who trades favors. Call me Michael of the Lavender Coast, though the Braavosi Bank knows me by other names. He inclined his head towards Sansa. Lady Stark, your hair burns like the autumn we miss in the north. The city of Braavos still remembers the honor of your house. When you and Arya stepped between them. Braavos remembers many things. What debts do you tally today? Michael chuckled. Only an opportunity. You wish to sail for Sunspear. Coin buys horses, but wind drives ships. And a galley with lateen sails anchors tonight at Falling Quay, bound for Planky Town with the dawn tide. I can offer passage, 5 souls, and 2 mares, if in exchange you deliver a sealed letter to Prince Oberyn's steward. Nothing more. Tyrion frowned. And why not use a courier? Some messages walk safer, cloaked as lost lambs, Michael said, eyes glinting. Curiosity costs nothing, Lord Imp. Suspicion can cost lives. He produced a slim scroll case of smoked glass, stoppered with a wax seal impressed by a coin. A weeping maiden whose tears formed a sigil none of them recognized. Tyrion turned the case in his stubby fingers, but did not break seal. We accept, he said at last. But if this letter condemns us, it condemns tyranny, Michael replied. A cause I believe you cherish. Arya saw truth in the man's gaze, or at least a conviction strong enough to mimic truth. She nodded to Sandor. The hound shrugged assent. Shay hugged Sackcloth's muzzle. Neither mare would survive a hot deck crossing, but the galley had stalls, Michael promised. That night, while Ghost Hill celebrated Oberyn's ascension with wine fountains and flutists, the fugitives followed Michael down a torch-lit cliff path to a small cove where the galley sea spear rocked at anchor, painted hull shimmering vermilion in lantern light. Sailors with sun-cracked skin and gold rings through nostrils loaded amphorae of date liquor. A bald captain introduced himself as Coro, once of Myr, now of no allegiance but sea and silver. He stowed their mares, assigned hammocks in the forward hold, and spat into the water for luck. When stars wheeled to their highest, the sea spear cut its moorings, unfurled wings of canvas, and slipped south along the liquid black road. Coasts slid by like a scrolling tapestry. Black cliffs cage waves, stubby dunes bristled with half-buried palisades, ruins of watchtowers jutted crooked as broken teeth. Overhead, constellations unfamiliar to Arya blinked. The Spear Maiden, the Basilisk. A sailor taught her their names while she balanced on the gunwale. sea spray needling her cheeks. Below deck, Sansa hummed a Winterfell lullaby to the mares, calming them against the hull's groans. Shae braided her own hair with red thread for luck. Tyrion remained at topside, drinking wine with the captain, voice low. On the third day, sails of cream and gold appeared astern. Coro cursed. Those were banner ships of House Vaith, loyal but unpredictable. He ordered oars run out, and the sea spear sprinted, keel slicing jade water. Wind favored them. Vaith's heavier cogs fell back. By sunset, only gull echoes trailed their wake. That night, Coro allowed a small deck fire shielded by canvas to share stew with the crew. They swapped tales of Dothraki corsairs plundering Carthene spice galleys, of black ships with striped sails prowling slave, of dragons glimpsed in the furthest east. One grizzled pilot claimed he'd seen a scaly shadow wheel over the summer sea at moonrise, a living star with wings of copper veined black. The crew laughed until the pilot brandished a shard of scale he wore as charm. Shae shrank from it. Tyrion examined the fragment, eyes gleaming with awe and dread alike. By dawn of the sixth day, amber cliffs parted to reveal the wide mouth of the Greenblood River. A forest of masts clustered where fresh water met salt. Planky town, the floating bazaar of timber piers lashed to barges, huts balanced on stilts, sails draped like bright banners between. Cries of vendors echoed across the green water. The sea spear threaded this labyrinth, bumping vendors against barges stocked with persimmons, copper weaponry, and snakes in wicker cages. Formal landing in Sunspear would take days of inspection. From Planky Town, small skiffs ferried passengers upriver or across dunes on camelback. Michelle guided them down a swaying pier to a tilt-roof tavern painted with yellow suns. There, under the scent of cumin and citrus, he purchased 6 passes to Sunspear's inland gate by sand skiff, a sail-driven sled atop steel runners drawn by twin grizzled mules. The skiff driver, a stocky woman with one eye milky from sun glare, introduced herself as Quada. She spat into sand for luck and urged them aboard. The sand skiff hurtled across rolling dunes, sails snapping taut in the afternoon wind. Yellow dust exploded beneath the runners. Sansa clutched the railing, hair streaming like a banner. She laughed for the first time in ARYA could not remember how long. Her voice bright, unburdened. Shae whooped beside her, arms flung wide. Even Tyrion's beard failed to hide his grin, though the jarring bounce left him clutching his ribs. Crumbling watchtowers, relics of Nymeria's wars, passed on either side. Occasionally, Bedouin goat herders raised spears in salute. Quada answered with a curt nod. For the sand skiff flew Prince Oberyn's sigil on a linen pennon. Sunset painted the desert blood orange, and as twilight cooled, they crested a final rise. Sunspear glittered below, alabaster spires thrusting into violet sky like blades forged of dusk itself. The domes glowed with lamplight. The wind off the sea carried jasmine and salt. At the inland gate, guards in copper scale bore spears taller than Sansa Dardai. Michelle presented his signet, and they bowed him through. He clasped Tyrion's shoulder. "Deliver the letter unopened," he murmured. To ARYA, he added, "Beware serpents who smile," and vanished into the crowd. Inside walls, the palace quarter wound through narrow arcades where fountains sang into marble basins, cooling the air. Dornish small folk strolled unhurried, some wearing dagger belts, but none with swords bared. Sandor grunted approvingly at the lack of steel. Here even he felt less glaring. They rented chambers on the top floor of a merchant's house overlooking the plaza of gentle palms. The rooms were airy, hung with woven rush mats, each bed a low dais padded by silken cushions. Sansa stroked the fabric in wonder, soft as lamb's ear. Tyrion dressed in a cream and copper doublet provided by their host, cinched with a narrow leather belt. Shay helped comb his wild beard into something civilized, then placed a kiss on his bruised wrist. Sandor refused new clothes. He washed in a courtyard fountain instead, and tied back his hair with twine. Arya borrowed a jasmine-scented tunic, dyed a rich indigo. She liked how it let her move freely, the color not unlike the deep water pools of winter rivers. That evening, accompanied by 2 palace pages, they crossed the plaza where torches framed dancers spinning in diaphanous silks. Music drifted from hidden courtyards, finger cymbals and the lap drum's quick pulse. The streets smelled of grilled lamb, oranges, and sandalwood smoke. No one bowed, no one sneered. Their presence merited curiosity, not threat. Last they reached the Tower of the Sun, tallest of Sunspear's spires, its apex crowned by a crescent of beaten gold. Inside, corridors spiraled upward, walls mosaicked with glass that caught torch flame and fractured it into rainbow shards. God stepped aside as the steward of Prince Oberyn himself, Sir Darren San, captain of the Spear Guard, met them halfway up the stair. He eyed the scroll case under Tyrion's arm, then motioned them into a chamber open to night, where silk curtains billowed and a small table bore decanters of honey-colored wine. Prince Oberyn Martell lounged on a chaise, one boot propped on its arm, fingers drumming idle cadence. He wore loose crimson robes, cinched with a gold serpent belt. The hilt of a stiletto-like blade peeked above his collar. His eyes, dark as coffee, flicked from Tyrion to Arya, lingered a heartbeat on Sansa, then returned to the dwarf. A half-smile curved his mouth. "So the vipers whisper truly," he said. "A Lannister cub slinks into my court, trailing wolf pups and a half-burnt hound." Tyrion corrected pleasantly. "But Lannister no longer. Lion, perhaps. Though I'd not trust the pride behind me." "No." Oberyn's laugh was warm, though sharp at the edges. He gestured to a servant who filled goblets. "Your letter?" Tyrion set the glass case on a low table. Darren Sand cracked a seal, drew the scroll. Oberyn skimmed, expression shifting from intrigue to fury muted beneath calculation. He snapped fingers. Darren unfurled the parchment for the travelers to see. A ledger of payments made by House Lannister to a Braavosi agent for the assassination of a young Dornish woman in Old Town 6 years prior. Blood money, signed by Lord Tywin's own steward. Beneath, scribbled in Tywin's angular hand, a note. "No witnesses." Oberyn's voice turned soft. "My sister Elia's butcher was not the first lion to claw Dorne. It appears my cousin Dryden's bride also fell to Golden Fangs, and this proof arrives in hands hounded by the same house." He sipped wine, gaze piercing Tyrion. "Why betray your blood?" "Blood betrayed me first," Tyrion said. "And the realm. I deliver truth. What you forge from it is your craft, my prince." Oberyn rose, robe rustling. He circled Arya and Sansa, studying like a jeweler assessing gems. "Stark girls, Dorne owes your house an old debt. We fostered your father when Ned Stark was a boy. Yet Northmen rarely venture to our sands. What boon seeks Winterfell?" Sansa opened her mouth, but words tangled in her throat. Arya stepped forward. "Justice," she said, "for our father. For Ned Stark, who lost his head to Lannister lies. For Robb, who lost crown and heart at a crossing watered by lions." Oberyn tilted his head. "Justice wears many faces. One, vengeance. Another, peace, which wears best on the daughters of wolves." "Both," Arya answered without pause. The prince's grin flashed, spoken like a sand snake. He turned to Sandor. "And you, hound?" "Looking for a bone, prince," Sandor said. "One not held by lions." Oberyn clapped. "Bold truth, bold company. Perhaps Dorne can lend shelter to strays who bite their former masters." He paced to the balcony, overlooking the city. Thunder rolled far out at sea. lightning veins striking clouds. Yet, the scorpion's sting must be chosen. Harboring you invites war with both rock and rose. Tyrell ships already blockade the Mander's mouth. Cersei's cell sails prowl the stepstones. We risk strangling trade and blood on our sands. Tyrion bowed. Then we offer more than risk. I bring the crown's hidden ledgers, proof of debts owed to the Iron Bank, proof of Tyrell coin funding renegade sellswords. With them you wield lever enough to pry open the small council's ribs. Give me audience before the new king. Young Tommen is but Tommen, malleable as wax. And I will shape truth to carve Cersei from power. Nani de me to show me. Oberyn considered, palms clasped behind back. And what shape does the wolf crave? Return him of Winterfell to its rightful blood, Sansa said, voice finally steady. Annulling Bolton claims. Recognition that the North recalls who gutted it, Arya added, and the heads of those who call themselves Frey. Oberyn's grin cooled to something predatory. All expensive, but Dorne enjoys costly indulgence. Let us dine. He summoned attendants. They guided the fugitives to a private garden where torches burned in sconces scented with cardamom. Platters arrived, spiced goat, pomegranate salad, honeyed chickpeas. Wine flowed crimson. Oberyn ate sparingly, eyes seldom leaving his guests. Conversation danced, Dornish law, Braavosi contracts, the rising tensions in Slaver's Bay. Shae spoke little, yet Oberyn's sisters-in-law, the Lady Nym and the Lady Tyene, arriving halfway through, took interest in her free city accent and teased stories from her. When stars crowned midnight, Oberyn rose. You will lodge in the palace of tides under my protection, he decreed. Rest, bathe, forget dust. On the morrow we train steel. Strength tests truth. His gaze lingered on Arya. I sense in you the beat of Braavos. My brother-in-law, to be, Daeron, instructs with spear and footwork. I myself teach dagger. Bring your best morning courage. Arya bowed, exhilaration prickling. Sandor smirked. He welcomed tests of arms. Yet as attendants led them away, Arya spied Myshal in an alcove above, half shrouded in vine shade, speaking to a hooded figure coated in desert travel robes. Their exchange was swift, parchment passed hands. When the hood slid back, moonlight kissed pale hair of silver gold. The stranger turned slightly, and Arya glimpsed eyes purple as twilight sea. A Targaryen hue, unmistakable. But the face belonged not to Daenerys, rumored far across the world, but to a boy perhaps 2 years younger than Arya, jaw still soft with youth, yet gaze sharpened by wary calculation. Before she could alert the others, the pair melted into shadow. In the Palace of Tides, marble walls muffled sea surf. Bathing pools steamed with rose oil. Servants pressed citrus-scent towels, though Arya waved them away. She plunged into the tepid water-clothed, knife within reach, letting heat unwind muscle knots. Sansa surrendered to luxury, allowing women to comb salt crystals from her scalp. Shae soaked until her eyes closed. Sandor settled into a hotter pool, steam concealing his scars. Tyrion wandered to a terrace overlooking the moonlit bay. Arya followed after dressing in soft cotton tunic. She found him leaning on a balustrade, cup cradled in both hands. The sea glittered dark and restless. Lantern points on distant ships mark trade lanes like fireflies pinned to velvet. Your mind sails that way, Arya said, standing beside him. It never anchored, he replied. There's a freedom in horizons that kings cannot command. Yet you aim to return to a court of blades. Tyrion sighed. Some prisons grow around absence. A broken realm will devour its children if none repair its walls. Arya traced a pattern on the stone, the direwolf sigil in dew. Walls trap. They also defend. Both. Twice. He drained his cup, set it down. Will you fight for it? I fight for the living. She flexed the fingers that once clutched needle beneath a red sky at Harrenhal. If the throne shields the living, perhaps. He nodded, as if that answered more than he had asked. Morning awoke, sun spear in sheets of amber sun. Fountains sprayed dew that refracted light into rainbows across sandy courtyards. Darren Sand met ARYA with a grin and wooden spears trimmed light as broom handles. He taught footwork akin to Bravosi water, dancing but looser, hips driving lunges. ARYA learned steps named for desert creatures, the sidewinder sway, vulture peck, scorpion knot. Sweat glued her tunic, but exhilaration burst behind her eyes. Darren praised her ferocity. She cherished praise, but craved perfection more, drilling until noon bell. Meanwhile, Sansa studied Dornish letters with Lady Tynee, who promised that knowledge is armor quieter than steel. Shay joined palace chirurgeons, learning herbs used to staunch wounds. Sandor sparred with Oberyn's captain, the clash of spear and greatsword echoing across colonnades. Observers whispered wages. Hound's brute, reach, or viper's lightning point. Sandor lost first bout, 1 second, laughed when the blade nicked his maimed cheek. By midday, blood and sweat traced paths down his chest, but he looked younger, near joyful in pain. After lessons, they gathered for fresh dates and goat yogurt. Oberyn arrived, tossing a rolled parchment onto the table. Good tidings, he announced. Little Tommen's small council summons representatives of every great house to King's Landing for a moot. They name it a conclave of reconciliation. I smell Tyrell honey over Lannister rot. Nevertheless, I ride in 3 days. You shall ride with me, my ward and counselors. Naum, Jeruai, Shijigem Stotie. Tyrion bowed. An escort of sand and lions, a novel heraldry. Oberyn's eyes glimmered. I shall present House Stark's claim your ledgers, and a Dornish treaty of mutual defense. Let the 7 kingdoms decide if wolf and viper can outwit the lion and the flower. Sansa swallowed. Return to King's Landing, to the place of... Arya took her hand. We go as hunters, not prey. She gripped a garrote beneath her sash. The lion's den burned once. It may burn again. Nizen, not again. Oberyn smiled at Arya's resolve, but his gaze slid past her, tracking a servant who hurried across the courtyard. The same hooded youth Arya had seen at midnight, now garbed in sand-silk robes. The boy delivered a scroll to a baron, bowed and retreated. Arya noted the thumbnail-long scar along his jaw, the quick grace of his steps. Assassin or acrobat. Oberyn broke seal, scanned, his brow furrowed. Daenerys Stormborn sails for Westeros, he murmured. Aboard ships bearing the Unsullied. 3 dragons rampant. Tyrion coughed on yogurt. Sansa paled. Oberyn continued. And this letter claims she bears a nephew, Aegon, son of Rhaegar, hidden these many years. Arya felt her heartbeat slam. The boy arrived 2 nights past to treat with me, pledging alliance between dragon and viper. The prince looked to Arya. You noticed his entry. I value such eyes. What does he want? Sansa whispered. To wrest crown from child kings and grieving queens. Dragons no entitlement. Oberyn folded the letter, tucking it away. But I shall weigh offers at my table, not theirs. Let us feast tonight. Tomorrow we chart our strike. Nan, Nyandos, Yestu, Nane. That evening, Arya roamed the palace rooftop, restless. Gulls wheeled overhead, squawking. The salt wind tangled her damp hair. Somewhere below, musicians tuned flutes for the feast. Laughter drifted. She could not rest while schemes multiplied. She paced to the parapet facing the sea. The dragon boy, Egon, balanced there, silhouette against copper dusk, tossing stones into the waves. He turned as she approached, eyes violet, but ringed dark with fatigue. "You see danger where others see sand," he said quietly. "I observed your drills. Precision admirable. Nudidum me. Spying on your host," Arya replied. "On guests." His smile was wry. "You carry many deaths behind your eyes. And you? Mine lie ahead." He pitched another stone. "Will you hunt me? If you hunt innocence, I hunt thrones. Innocence is seldom seated upon them." She studied him. His features echoed the portraits of young Rhaegar she had glimpsed in dusty Winterfell tomes. High cheekbones, straight nose, something melancholy in the tilt of mouth, yet hardness tempered any princely softness. Under his robe a thin sword's hilt winked, Valyrian steel, etched with runes like vines. "Dragons bring fire," she said. "Fire burns wolves and lions alike. That is the nature of flame." She fingered the stiletto Jaqen gave her. "I've watched fire dance on water. It consumes friend, foe, bystander. Give me reason to trust your flame." He met her gaze. "I would forge a world where bastards like us are not pawns, where birth cannot condemn. My mother died in swaddling. I lived in exile learning trade and sword and hunger. Now I return, not as prince alone, but as proof that a realm's cruelty can be outlived. Help me, while anointing." "Words," Arya said. "Truth walks clad in deeds." He inclined his head. "Then judge by deeds soon." He vaulted lightly from parapet to balcony walkway and vanished through a silk drape. That night, the feast overflowed. Roasted kid stuffed with dates, saffron rice in bronze cauldrons, flatbread sprinkled with sumac. Oberyn sat at head, daughters, the sand snakes, arrayed like jeweled daggers, Obara wiry in leather, Nymeria swathed in see-through gauze, concealing nothing, Tyne garbed in white chaste, but eyes sinful. They traded quips and pomegranates, testing the newcomer's wit. Between courses, Oberyn stood, goblet raised. Dawn toasts the brave who carve their own legends. He gestured at Arya, a wolf with water dancer feet. At Sansa, a stone rose that blossoms beyond frost. At Tyrion, a lion who roars against his cage. At Sandor, a hound who bites false masters. At Shay, and a skylark who still sings after storms. Finally, he lifted goblet to the gallery where the dragon boy watched unseen by most. To princes reborn, the gallery torches flared. Music erupted. Dancers whirled. Shay coaxed Sansa into a circle. Though hesitant, she found step, hair swirling. Arya sipped spiced wine, relishing warmth across her chest. Sandor gnawed ribs, ignoring flirtations. But joy fractured when Daron Sand hurried to a barren side, whispering urgent words. The prince's eyes narrowed. He clapped twice. Music halted. "Forgive pause," he announced. A messenger arrives from the stepstones. A sail bearing Lannister red approaches Shadow City. They sue for parley at first light. Tyrion's jaw clenched. Cersei wastes no breath. Oberyn's gaze swept the hall. "Parley can cloak poison. I will meet them beyond walls with this council," meaning the fugitives. After feast, Arya sequestered in her chamber overlooking a moonlit courtyard. She stripped gear, cleaned needle, coiled garrote. The desert air carried distant surf and the lavender brush fragrance of Dorne's night gardens. She allowed the calm inside to grow, a still pool in which watchful thoughts could reflect. Tap sounded. Sansa slipped in, face pale. "I dreamed of father," she whispered. "He warned of crimson waves. Do not go to the beach, Arya." Arya squeezed her shoulders. "Dreams guide caution." But I am no longer a child chasing cats. Sansa's eyes brimmed. Then let me stand too. You'll remain behind. Protect Shay. Tyrion may need shield inside walls. May Downe. Nalis to hide while you risk death again. Sansa's tone trembled with frustration. To survive is risk enough, Arya said softly. Trust me. She kissed her sister's brow, tasting the salt of tears. Dawn crept rose and gold over the Sea of Dorne. Oberyn assembled his retinue beyond Shadow City's outer dunes. A scrim of sand where rock teeth jutted like half-buried titans. 50 spearmen arrayed in crescent behind him. Midi. Arya rode a lean desert stallion, Sandor beside on sackcloth, now hard-muscled. Tyrion followed in a rickety palanquin slung between two small donkeys, his idea mockery of royal pomp. On the opposite side of the beach, 3 corsair galleys flew makeshift banners. Lannister crimson cut by a black diagonal stripe. Ashore stood an envoy, tall woman in plate gilded at breast and gorget, helm crested by golden wings. Her cloak lined with ermine dragged in sand. At her rear 10 crossbowmen kept bows tilted upright but loaded. Oberyn dismounted, approached. Arya and Sandor flanked him, spearmen fanned wide but held ground. Sea wind whipped cloaks. Gulls screamed overhead. The envoy removed helm. Golden loops of hair framed a stern face crowned by piercing green eyes. Not Cersei but Genna Lannister, her aunt, famed in courts for cunning tongues and sharper purrs. She spoke clear. Prince Oberyn, House Lannister extends olive branch. We propose alliance. Sunspear weds the young king, Tommen Baratheon, to Lady Arianne Martell, uniting houses and ending grievances. Oberyn smiled thin. Generous, considering the blood your house owes mine. I would ask how you propose to atone for Elias' murder and for these newer crimes. He tossed the Brevosi scroll at her feet. Sandgust buried half. Jenna Ben, read. Face tightened. Sheye. The late Lord Tywin cannot answer. She dropped scroll. But lion repays debts. Name price. Justice, Oberyn said, which tastes unlike gold. Jenna's gaze flicked over Arya. House Stark partakes in this charade. Sansa is missing. Her abduction warrants sanction. I stand of my own will, Arya answered, and speak for the rightful lady of Winterfell. Child, you speak treason. Jenna's lips curled. Sandor stepped forward with a low growl. Spew that again, lion so, and I'll choke it. Crossbows lifted. Spearmen lowered spears. Tension vibrated like a toad's throat. Jenna raised palm. Her men stilled. Listen, a kill mad dog and wolf pups will not decide realms. I bring more than marriage. Gold enough to rebuild your water gardens, fleets to escort trade to Volantis, and the head of the Queen Regent should she stand guilty. Cersei wields throne now. Tommen rules in name. Oberyn tilted head. So a lion hunts lion. Fascinating. He knelt, scooped sand, let it stream through fingers. Yet you sail 3 ships, guarded by 10 bows. Where hides your army? In words, Jenna said. The Tyrells plan to seat Margaery as Queen Regent. They will arrest Cersei within the moon. Stand aside and Westeros avoids war. Oberyn smiled again, a curve like a scorpion's tail. Avoid war, or choose its battlefield? He rose. Dorne chooses its own sand. My answer arrives at conclave. Jenna shot a sharp glance at Arya. And you, little wolf, choose north over desert. Wear fealty. I'll see Bolton flayed and Winterfell restored. Arya's laugh cut her. The day I trust a lion's claw is the day I sheathe my teeth. Then bare them and bleed. Jenna signaled. Crossbows clacked down. Bolts fired. But Oberyn had moved as the signal rose. He spun, crimson robe billowing, free hand yanking Arya behind him. Sandor hurled himself forward, shield raised. Shafts rattled on iron, caromed from spears. One bolt grazed Arya's shoulder, but failed to pierce leather. Dornish spears launched, arcs of wood and steel. Lannister crossbowmen fell. Two remained, reloading. Jenna drew sword, lunged at Oberyn. He sidestepped, using her momentum. His dagger flashed, sliced vambrace strap. Sandor crashed round shield into another crossbowman, snapping spine. Arya darted left, blade slicing hamstring of last archer just as he loosed. Bolt veered sky, lost. She parried upward, flipped grip, slipped bone stiletto under collar. He gurgled. Jenna pressed Oberyn hard. She swung overhead, but he ducked, slashed thigh. She stumbled. He twisted, kicked knee. Sand splattered. She stabbed low. He leapt aside, blade tracing arc that kissed her cheek, scarlet blossom. She spat. Bolts whistled again. Lannister Marines at waterline fired from behind ship's boats. One Dornish spearman fell, nailed through eye. Oberyn balked in high Valyrian. 3 trained javelin throwers hurled. The Marines dropped. Jenna raised helm, blood-streaking chin. "This is only the beginning," she hissed. She sprinted toward dinghy beached at tide line. Arya raced after. Oberyn yelled, "Let her go! Message must carry!" Jenna shoved boat free, leapt, oars stroking. Arrows chased but fell short. She reached galley, scrambling up net. Oberyn wiped dagger on crimson robe. "Send Raven. Dawn rides north. War chooses us regardless." He regarded. "Arya, you bounded fast, good." Sandor retrieved helm, tossed it to a wounded spearman, then eyed Arya's bleeding shoulder. "Scratch," she said. He grunted approval. They returned to Sunspear in subdued silence, carrying their dead. The plaza parted, whispers spreading. That eve, council convened beneath jade lanterns. Present, Oberyn, his brother Doran, gout-stricken in wheeled chair but sharp of mind. Aegon Targaryen, cloaked in worn silk. Arya, Sansa, Tyrion, Sandor, Shay, the Sand Snakes, Sir Daron, Michael of Bravos. Doran spoke first, voice soft like rustle of parchment. The Iron Throne teeters between lions and roses. Now dragons approach. We must decide if Dornish steel tempers chaos or forges our ruin. Aegon stepped forward, bowing. My claim binds dragons to your cause. Ally with me. Together we free realm from petty squabbles. The North restored, Dorne independent under treaty, the realm healed. Nidern, Shemade, Tezuti, Maedvidol. Tyrion sipped wine. Noble, yet dragons seldom heal. They cauterize. He spread ledgers. Tyrell gold funds half the realm's grain. Burn them and you starve millions. Aegon met his gaze. Grain fields regrow under peaceful rule. Grain cannot regrow bones, Tyrion said. Oberyn drummed fingers. Suggest instead, Prince, how your fire spares fields. By ending war swiftly, Aegon said. Strike Casterly Rock, break rose stems, claim throne before autumn harvest. Arya watched Sansa, her sister's eyes clouded, imagining more rivers turned crimson. She squeezed Sansa's hand, the shared memory of war's bite. Michael spoke then, gentle. Bankers loom behind crowns. The Iron Bank loaned Lannister gold to arm sell sales. Failing repayment, they may invest in a new king. If so, your war funds itself. But they demand certainty. Provide Wolf and Viper as guarantors. They open chests. Doran murmured. Gold buys sellswords, not loyalty. Gold and dragon flame, Aegon said. Sandor spat onto mosaic. Talk circles like dog chasing tail. North's frozen, south's burning. Choose path, talk or swing steel. Arya stood. I will march north, whatever road. If Dorn rides, Winterfell rises. My sister will rule her birthright. I will cut those who deny. Dragon or viper, join, but do not delay behind words. Sansa rose beside. The North remembers truth, honor, promise. Join us, and Northmen fight as allies, not conquest fodder. Doran eyed them with emotion, perhaps recalling young Eddard's quiet gallantry. He nodded slow. Then Dorn commits. Spearguard rides with Prince Oberyn to the conclave. My banner's ready in reserve. We will judge there the worth of roses, lions, and dragons alike. Michael inclined head. The bank will observe. Egon's jaw firmed. I ride too. Oberyn shrugged. A squire to my daughters, perhaps. Council dispersed. Outside, breezes carried distant flute notes. Sun's spear still alive, unknowing its peace crack. Later that night, Arya returned to parapet. Aegon leaned on balustrade. War it is, he said, not triumph but burden. Arya nodded. Wars end eventually. People survive. Modern mightiness if they shape the peace before enemies do. She thought of her list, the names yet uncrossed. We shape peace with each enemy removed. Aegon offered a slender dagger with dragonbone hilt for new names. She accepted, feeling balance, lighter than frost, ready to sing. She tucked it beside the bone stiletto. 4 old names first. Below, waves whispered secrets against black stones. The moon, 3/4 waxed, glowed like polished steel. In its light, Arya Stark watched her shadow meld with that of a dragon prince on Sunspear's height, each cast long across the terrace tiles. Shadows entwined, then parted, pointing different directions, but both toward distant crowns. They would ride soon, up river valleys and war-torn plains. Under banners newly forged, Sunspear crossed with direwolf, flanked by lion, shunned by its pride, trailed by dragon, unfurled above viper sands. Whether realm birthed freedom or fire, Arya did not yet know. But she felt the tight coil of fate in her chest, not unlike the garrote beneath her sleeve, waiting to pull taut. And she resolved, as the wind shifted and smelt of jasmine and salt, that whatever storms came, she would stand blade still in their eye, until the very last name breathed its final breath.